Welcome to episode 19 of Open Betas with Regal and Swimfan, the podcast about the life of games and the game of life. I'm Regal.
And I'm Swimfan.
Now what? I know you did the intro. I forgot what comes next. So this week we're going to be talking about
This is good so far.
we're talking about game. All right, I want to start over.
No, I was just kidding.
Okay. Well, this week we'll be talking about gaming as an identity, which sounds like a deep and dark topic. But we're not really going to be talking too much about that. We're going to be mostly talking about gamers as a subculture, their effect on the world, and what it not so much what it means to be one, but mostly what it really means to see yourself as a quote-unquote gamer, what it means to introduce yourself to other people as a gamer. Should anyone do that? What kind of role should games play in your life, really? Is it healthy to care so much about games that you introduce yourself as a gamer? You know, all the good stuff.
Is it brave and heroic to be a gamer?
Yes.
Are you defending Western civilization?
Yep. Defending men's rights, of course.
Yes, men's rights.
Yep.
The women and their cooties. I know. Playing video games.
Yeah, so, this mostly will be conversational, I hope. We'll just broach some high-level topics. I don't think we're going to reach any staggering conclusions here.
No. We're going to establish what truth is.
Oh, okay.
I guarantee that. Regal does not.
What is truth, by the way? How do we know what is really true and what is not?
I think it's on the Drudge Report.
One thing that authoritarian authoritarian is not necessarily the right word. What do you call them? Like what do you call like Trump America and like Putin Russia? There's like a term that encompasses that kind of regime, like faux democratic cult of personality type regimes.
Yeah, I mean a certain amount of authoritarianism, sure.
Yeah.
Or,
anyway,
I don't know what you're looking for.
One interesting thing I learned was one common thing those
demagoguery.
Yeah, one common thing those have in common is one of their first steps is to sort of like subvert truth. Like I think one of Putin's core beliefs is that like people should not believe that there is any such thing as truth. It's all relative and subjective.
Yeah,
so,
I mean,
therefore,
we're doing pretty good at that so far.
So, and same with America, and same with most of the like right-wing extremist movements around the world.
I mean, Kojima was right again. Kojima was right. Metal Gear Solid 2. Instead of bringing the light of knowledge to all people, it just flooded them with information, most of which is nonsense.
Yep. After all, how can a real person, a human person, tell the difference between what's true and what's made up? It's impossible.
It's impossible. You even if you see it yourself, evidently.
Okay, so let's start with some patch notes.
Yeah.
On that note.
Oh, sure. There's one thing I wanted to mention. This is gonna be good. About something I missed on the Thievery episode, which I think was the last episode, 2 episodes ago.
Indeed.
Is the stealth crouch, as it's known, sort of the standardization in most 3D games that to go into quote unquote stealth mode, to become stealthy, you kind of crouch down and move crouchily around, which is like sneakily, I guess. Which of course in real life makes no sense. Just try it. Try to crouch down and walk around. See how long your calves, no, that's not it. One of the big ones, quads, hang up. See how long your quads last, and get back to me. Anyway, that's it.
It is kind of funny. It's like one of those game representation things. So, for example, in WoW, when you stealth, nothing happens. You just walk slower.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you think about what's actually happening, it's kind of funny. Like the rogue can be walking through the middle of a field, like upright, standing up, but they're like in stealth mode, so you can't see them.
Yeah, rather than you're like literally prone and crawling through the tall
Yeah,
grass or something.
that's slightly more realistic, I guess. But I guess at some point it's just like a game thing to sort of tell the player that they're sneaking.
It totally is, and it also means that in some games it means your character is hiding behind cover or
Right.
hiding in tall grass, which is a very popular stealth mechanic.
I wonder what like operatives in real life actually do to be stealth. This reminds me. This one time in San Diego, we were just driving around, and I saw like this slightly overweight cop, like
Hmm.
try sort of with his gun out, which is kind of weird. Like try to do like a stealth thing, like a stealth movement. Like I don't know,
Um.
he was like raiding some house for drug dealers or
Okay.
something. I would assume, or he was
Uh
just
huh.
like he saw a black guy in a
Yeah.
home
It
and
was
was
like,
gonna like break down the door,
yeah,
one or
so
the
I'm taking
other.
out his trash.
But yeah, he sort of like he was like this big slightly overweight guy, and he sort of just like, but he was doing all the stealth moves, like he was like turn his shoulders around and like duck
Uh
behind
huh.
the
Uh huh.
car, and like I mean we were driving by him, so I didn't really see much beyond that, but not very stealthy, gotta
Didn't
say.
seem very stealthy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
So
sure there's some kind of training. Like, I would think staying pretty, unless you're hiding, you're staying pretty upright and just like, I don't know, walking differently, tiptoeing,
I guess the
avoiding the
answer,
leaves.
you wear camo, right? You wear camo and then you're invisible. No one can see you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Exactly.
It's a technology thing. I got it. Um, okay, I wanted to add in one of the earlier patch notes, I mentioned this idea of how it feels like it's better to learn by doing the wrong thing rather than the right thing. And I,
So to seeing what can go wrong versus.
yeah, sort of like we were talking about this in the tutorial episode, right? Like how you can teach
Hmm.
a person to play games. And I think one of the things that came up when watching that video and looking at other examples is that when you sort of just tell the player like this is the right thing to do, they sort of just blindly follow it for the rest of the game, right? Like they kind of,
Right. I may not learn it. I just like
yeah,
press the button prompt.
right. Or it's like you teach them one way to solve a problem, and they kind of assume that's the only way to solve a problem, right?
Uh-huh.
You're just like, yeah, but lost my train of thought for a second. Oh, anyway, so I think I think it can be helpful because we see that in real life too, actually. Like when someone is taught how to do something and be like, hey, this is the right way to solve this one problem that you have, people
Yeah.
sort of just do that for the rest of their lives and very rarely like go back and think about a new way to do it or a better way to do it. Or when the thing becomes outdated, they're like, no, this should work. Just do it again.
Yeah.
Um,
If it works
yeah.
enough, it works.
Um, I think it can be helpful. The reason it's helpful to add more detail to that thought is the reason it can be helpful to learn by doing the wrong thing is that often that means the player, the person who's performing the wrong thing, generates their own idea or becomes somehow like more fully convinced that it's wrong. So one example is like when you when a kid touches a hot stove, you can tell the kid to not touch the hot stove, right? Many
Hmm.
times, but there is some truth to the idea that like it's not until the kid does it or gets really close to doing it without actually hurting themselves that they like fully understand and grasp that, oh, it's not
Yeah.
just a rule in the house that they can't do this. It's not something dictated from heaven. There's like this
Yeah.
actual tangible reason. And I think something similar
Get my
can happen
hand
in
burnt.
games when it's like, hey, if you just let the player kill themselves, they'll be like, oh, okay, that it's not just like I can't do that. Just like that kills me.
Right. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and through the process of doing, somehow like it feels like the player or the person in real life like fully understands like all the reasons why, right? Rather than just knowing like this is good and this is bad.
Yeah, it seems that way. And then on top of that, the whole what you mentioned about doing this as the only option,
Right.
there must be some way to kind of teach you about the tools you have and then let you loose on the
Right.
problem set.
Yeah.
Is
And
this what's the patch note here? What's different than what we said before?
I just wanted to add more information to what I
Okay,
said
okay.
before, because I think last
For
time
the
I
real
just
life.
sort of just threw this out there, but didn't fully
Okay.
explain it with an example. And I think
Hmm.
one more small thing is here is that it's good to have the player generate their own ideas and try them. So this came up for me in learning about or like really learning about, like for me it was learning about chess openings, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more about any kind of game where you're sort of trying to learn like a strategy or something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's good, like, for example, in chess openings, you sort of just, sometimes they're taught as just like, okay, well, you do this, then this, then this, right? It's sort of just a thing you have to memorize.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it became very helpful when I was like, okay, but what if you don't do this? And then there's some tool that shows you why that's not good, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, well, you just told me to do this, but what if I do this other thing? I
Yeah.
think one thing that
It's
can
just more context in general about what you're
yeah,
learning gives a deeper
yeah.
understanding. Yeah.
In general, yeah, I just think it's helpful for people to get proven to have it proven to them that they're wrong, right? Rather than just told that they're wrong.
Yeah. I think you're right. I'm trying to think of some fun other real world examples, but hot stove works.
Yeah. And you kind of see this the other way too. Like one of the things about like online discourse often is that people have just been like, people get in this cycle where they're just told that this is right and this is wrong, and then they see that broken sometimes, inevitably, and then they're like, well, everything I've been told is right, it's just wrong. Like there's no truth. So
Yeah, I mean, politicians do that
yeah,
constantly.
exactly.
The whole, we've talked about it before, but the words are wind thing. Don't listen to what people say, just look at what they do. And politicians talk and talk. They make promises all the time that turn out to be not true. And if you want to believe that, well, they wanted to do it, but they couldn't do it, you can string someone along a long time that way.
Right.
But usually people would just get disillusioned. They're like, oh well, this is all bullshit. They're not going to do shit for me. So
That's a big
why do
problem.
I even vote?
That's like a existing massive problem in some communities in
Yeah,
the US
I mean,
right
when
now.
you have a government that doesn't actually meaningfully try to make your life better, it's
Well, it depends on
gonna have
who
that
you
experience
are,
a lot.
but yeah, it
It
is.
depends who you are. True,
Yeah.
true.
But yeah, I think in the context of games, one way that shows up is people often, what's the right way? People often feel like they know way more than they do, but they never test their ideas. Like
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to online discourse, it's just like, oh well, like obviously, just look at the system. I mean, look, it should be like this, right? People are just doing it wrong because they're stupid. But if you
Mm-hmm.
never test that idea that you have, maybe you can't because you're not high enough rank, right? And that's kind of the excuse, or like
Oh, sure, sure,
like
sure.
my
Yeah,
teammates
yeah,
aren't
yeah.
good enough to implement my ideas or whatever.
I mean, that was a the teammate thing. I mean, that was always a plus and minus of working with League of Legends stuff, because it's like there is a psychological element that keeps you playing because you can blame your mistakes on the four other people on your team rather than yourself. But also that you kind of only are going to reach a certain ceiling if you do that.
Right, right.
But
That's
that's
actually very
part of
interesting.
life. Part of life is us realizing we're responsible for ourselves.
Right. I mean, it's a huge thing in all the team-based games, right? That's sort of a core idea that like you
Yeah.
really it's very, very rare for a player to get very good if they never have the realization that you have to focus on yourself and control your
Yeah,
control and
and
blame yourself for your mistakes and not worry too much about your team.
I mean, the importance of coaches is huge. Like
Yeah.
someone telling you, no, this wasn't their fault. This is your fault. This is what you
Right.
need to work on.
Right.
Like accept it and do it instead of trying to fucking
Yeah.
offload your mistakes on somebody else.
That would be an interesting topic actually, like game MOBA gamer psychology. How much information did you garner through like research or whatever while you were working on League of Legends? I guess you were
About like
never
the
wo-
psychology
never
of them.
working. Yeah.
I mean, remember that they're generally younger people, right?
Yeah.
Teenagers and in their 20s, and so there's a lot of the people that who aren't emotionally able to to handle being on a team and taking feedback and working together. I mean, there's just a lot of people, especially at that age, who are not going to succeed at it, and that is a huge liability on of course a team game.
Right.
Like you really got to be all working together.
That's one of the generally like when people talk about how important sports are for youth or whatever, like keeping sports programs in high schools or whatever. I think that's one of the most cited reasons. Yeah, P sports. That like
working
it's
with
really,
a team.
Yeah, it's really important to like put kids in a situation where they have to learn how to like work with a team and be coached and have a coach like tell them they're wrong and stuff like that.
Especially given like what your life is probably going to be about. You know, if you're working a job, you're going to have a similar structure.
Yeah, for sure. One of the it's healthy for that stuff to come out and sort of be fixed or like, you know, have its consequences in a more irrelevant scenario when, you know, such as a game or a sport, right? Because ultimately those things don't matter. And if you quit the team, nothing bad happens to you, rather than having it come out at your first job or the first time you have roommates, which, you know.
First time you have roommates. Yeah.
One in 100 people have just like this complete inability to adjust to having roommates, right? Just because they've never had to like deal with another human before.
Probably more than 1 in 100.
Yeah, probably not.
I mean, there must be maybe eventually.
Yeah.
Have you? Let's not get into it now. I was going to ask your roommate's experience.
Oh, I have. I had a crazy roommate. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Literally. Yeah.
Like
for half a year.
In what way?
You know, he just threatened to. Oh, he hinted at threatening to perform violence on the entire dorm area, and then retired from school. So that was good.
Right decision though. Rather than enacting his plan. Yeah, geez, that's scary.
It wasn't really that scary. I'm 100% sure he didn't mean it, but I think he was going through some stuff.
He loved to push those buttons.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to our actual topic.
All right.
So, where did this come from? Well, when I get depressive, I think about stuff like this, and then I talk about it. So that's where it came from. But more importantly,
like all good ideas.
More importantly,
from the depths of depression.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't know about good, but it came from it.
Yeah.
It's a fully formed idea. I don't know if it's a good idea, but so
I'm gonna say it's good.
So when I look at, there's this gap I see. If I look at the way people talk about games and who talks about games, especially in the most public forums, right? So we're talking about like social media, Reddit, to some extent like comments or like public feedback that devs get, reviews on Steam, things like that.
Everywhere that people who play games are supposed to
look for information about the game, right? Yeah. And there's some exceptions. So I think like actual fully formed content creator reviewers are exempt from this because they're sort of generally stable. Not all of them, but generally they're like stable, and you can like they try to be reasonable about their takes and like.
When you say content creators, you're talking like
not like streamers, like actual reviewers, like people who make not like reaction streamers, but like the actual like video game
press.
Donkey. Not necessarily paid, but like Donkey or like other things in that vein. People who are like, hey, I actually played this game for 10 hours and I understand the game industry a little bit, and here's my review, right? And they'll point out they're not like shills, and they'll point out mistakes, but they're generally like reasonable about their criticisms, right? They're not just like
there exists some amount of those out there.
Again, not all of them, but I think in general, if I look at the people who are making information about the game, and that those people have an effect, right? Like even if you somehow believe that like you should never read a comment on the internet, which I kind of do believe, even if it doesn't affect you, it's obvious that it affects a lot of people, right? So for example, for me, I often see that like people who play games, so like streamers, for example, right? People who play games but aren't like deep in the weeds on them, like didn't follow the news on them or whatever, Like when a game comes out and they're disappointed, a lot of what they say is sort of influenced by what the discourse is. Right?
Yeah, of course.
So it's like,
what the major topics are.
Yeah. And a lot of their conclusions about the wider game industry are also influenced by those things, right? It's like, oh, well, games these days are so expensive. So it's like things like when a game raises its price, all of a sudden it becomes this sort of, it folds into this like larger discourse about like dev greed and like DLC or whatever, right?
Dev greed.
Those things come up in streamers that, those things come up in people who are not always reading the gaming subreddit or whatever, right? Like those things kind of filter down to them, which because those comments kind of have that effect.
I'm also not totally convinced because when I was working in games, whenever we did studies, basically just asking people where you get game information, it was totally fractured, and still, the biggest answer was always like, I play what my friends play. My friend told me about this game. I don't read about it. Like a lot of gamers, maybe I don't know if I can say most these days. No, I think I can. I think most people who play games probably just talk about it with their friends for the most part.
Yeah.
The amount of people who actually like engage or even lurk in the Reddits and the, GameSpot comments or whatever, IGN comments,
I think
is relatively low.
Yeah, I think that's true. But I think even among those people, I think the problem actually lies in that even among those people, what they believe then is still affected by what the discourse is, right? Because they have one friend who does do that, and then they, what they feel about the industry because they don't understand what they're not following the industry, right? They're not really keeping up with all the actual news, so they're colored often by what their one friend who does do that.
Yeah, they're just like my buddy here reads about this shit all the time, so I guess he's probably right.
It's sort of like if you only have one friend who you talk about sports with or whatever, right? Like they're
that's true. I would just
yourself
take it
don't
as
follow. Yeah,
gospel.
It's like, oh man, this guy on like this like fifth string or not fifth string, this like new rookie guy on like the Virginia Cowherds is really, really good. And you're like, oh, cool, he's really good. He might not actually be that good, but if your buddy thinks he's good, then that's what you believe, right?
Yeah, or Deflategate. Tom Brady is guilty of cheating.
Deflategate. Oh yeah, of course.
That's all I know.
Exactly.
Deflategate. You gotta stop using gate.
That's a whole nother.
I mean, I guess you got to do it with deflate because of the rhyme, but
anyway. So I see this big gap. So I think if I look at what the positive experience with games are, like what is fun about games, what makes people want to play games, when you play games, what makes it the best experience for the player, right? What kind of positive experiences appear, and then I look at what happens when people talk about games in these fields. I see a large gap. I see that these two things don't really line up, right? The things people talk about have very little to do with what their biggest experiences or what their best experiences are playing games.
Okay. You mean like just because it's generally feedback is negative and your positive experiences aren't, or what do you mean?
So what I mean is like the things people talk about are often about, first of all, they're often about negative things. And second of all, they're often about things that at the end of the day don't matter that much to your enjoyment. So for example, let's talk about price, right?
Okay.
So let's say there's one game that you really want to play and it costs $60 to the $45, or it costs $60 plus a $10 DLC instead of $60. Right? If you get really angry about that sort of can ruin. Well, I think it definitely ruins your enjoyment of the game, right?
If you're angry, if you feel ripped off, like you didn't get the value of this, sure.
The thing is, like, maybe
you have negative thoughts about it.
The thing is, maybe you did get the value or whatever, but I think the discourse about it causes you to feel like you got ripped off,
Yeah, even if independently you wouldn't have, you mean?
Even if independent, exactly right. That's sort of
Okay.
one example where it's like, the I think a lot of times that can sap the joy out of playing the actual game or the actual experience. And the things at the same time, the things that were the most positive experiences often don't get talked about, or they have a much smaller share of the pie. And I'm not saying that you just have to post all your positive comments about the game, but I think those things have a much smaller share of the pie than they should. And I think the things that have a larger share of the pie, or the majority of the pie of discourse, are things that can ultimately, I think, don't matter. Like whether a game costs $70 or $60, I think ultimately matters very, very little. Like almost doesn't matter.
Well, not to maybe the quality of the game, but I mean, yeah, I guess it doesn't. But I mean, it matters in. I have a couple things I want to say.
Okay, go for it. But I guess before we move on, like,
Okay, go on.
Did I make my point sort of clear, or are there still things that are not fully
I
formed?
guess, can you use is there another example? Is price the big one? Because it's just
Yeah. Okay.
it's
There's another
tied
example.
into the
There's
game, but it's
there's things
distinctly
like
separate.
there's things like delays or small bugs,
Uh-huh.
or DLC existing, or let's see what else. I haven't been on Reddit in a long time. There's things like um, dev player relationship, sort of.
Yeah. I mean, a
You
lot
know?
of this is around like why it comes from both directions, but like why aren't we getting the quality we think we deserve?
Yeah.
Especially like easy to spot things like day one bugs or whatever.
Right.
And we've talked about that. That's kind of an offshoot of the whole online and publisher driven dates, right? Like it's gonna happen
Right.
forever. Like, unless devs really have control of it. And even then, I mean, making games is hard. That shit happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, I generally agree with you. I mean, but I wonder if it's more of a universal thing, not just limited to games.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We want to get online and argue about the things that are bad in our mind, or the things we have what we think is a good point about it. Like
Sure.
I think
That's
this
why
could have
we're
been
here.
fixed by this. In my head, I'm like, this is obvious.
Yeah.
Versus like a good experience. I don't know. We just don't do that as much, do we? I mean, look at Yelp reviews or whatever.
Yeah.
Although I guess people put positive experiences.
I guess
there.
one other example is like design decisions, or like changes to the game is a big one. Like, the new game is cool, but it's not like the old game.
Yeah,
or
it's
like
interesting.
like
It's I wonder, is there something equivalent? I mean, so there is equivalence in sports for sure. Like people talk about the decisions of the coaches and the quality of the players, armchair quarterback stuff. But another like entertainment, like I'm sure in movies,
music has
Yeah.
this a lot, right? Whenever a band puts out a new album that's different than their old album, or the same as their old album, like stylistic expansion, this happens a lot, right? Where people talk about like U2 is not what they used to be. I miss the old
Yeah.
U2 or whatever, right?
yeah. So of course there's a lot of that.
It is universal. I think it's universal. But I think for any individual, if you sort of recognize that, and you maybe recognize that it's sapping your enjoyment of the game in some way, I think
It's
helpful.
interesting how much of us seem to do that,
Yeah.
even though it hurts us.
Well, I think people can learn to do it. I think it's a bit of a process, but and the reason I introduce this as gaming as an identity is that I think this comes up when you care a lot too much about games, perhaps, and I think that's where it comes from, where a lot of this stuff does not affect you if you are sort of consider yourself a passive consumer. Like when a new game comes out and you're like, oh, this is kind of worse than I thought it would be, and you weren't so invested in it necessarily, I think it's much easier to let that go and just go play a different game.
For sure.
To sort of go off.
I want to jump on two things here. So
Yeah.
one is the the price, the high price, and the a consumer society and marketing are all about the cult of the new. The new thing is the newest, is of course is the best thing. It has all the newest features. It's the highest polish. This is the big event of the year. All your friends are going to be playing it. Don't miss out. That culture that is just ever present where in the world, because we're a consumer society, driven, so much of our decisions and our what we like and don't like is driven by marketing, even though a lot of people don't really like to think of it that way. I think it's true. And our identity I'm going to say it, our identity in capitalism is so much, the choices we have often come down to which thing I buy, right? Or which things I buy, and what hobby I do, or what thing I collect. Because there is a lack of more real identity that you can achieve, that's really out there as an option for you, or it seems too hard or whatever. But I think we're in a weird, I think it's just a weird state of things that so many of us define ourselves by like an entertainment thing we engage in at all, but a lot of us do, like I have. So, I'm in no position to judge, just to be clear, but it's a weird state of affairs. And I think I think there's going to be something unfulfilling about just buying and consuming an entertainment thing and then just like talking about it and commenting on it. I mean, there is a life there, but it's just not, that sort of identity feels incomplete, I guess, is what I would say.
That's how I feel too.
Like, who the hell am I really? I'm just like the guy that buys the new game. Yeah. And I whenever I talk to people about games too, the cult of the new thing, I'm always telling them, like, well, it's tough with multiplayer games because you want to be competitive. You want to be there day one to be good at it and get the good loot. And maybe the servers are going to shut down in 3 years anyway. But single player games, I'm always like, stop buying them when they're new. They're going to be, first of all, they're going to be better in 2 years when all the patches and DLC are no longer paid and they've fixed the bugs and all that. It's like, there's no reason to do this. And there's so many good games already that are $10, $20 out there. But we have this thing where it's like, no, I got to play the new Bethesda thing, or I got to play the new Assassin's Creed, even though it doesn't, you really don't. You go play Black Flag again for $10. Anyway, sorry, that's it.
I think, I think that's largely how I feel too.
It's the same with movies. It's the same with everything. I mean, everything is driven by...
movies, the thing is, like, movies don't change after 2 years, right? It's sort of, the movie is the movie. And in fact, if you want to see
like George Lucas sometimes.
Well, yeah.
Patch 1.2.0.
And if you want to see it in the theater, you kind of have to at the beginning, right?
What do you mean?
If you want to see the movie, like, in the movie theater,
if you want to see it in the theater, yes, you have to.
Yeah, you have to.
The only time it'll happen.
I think one thing with games and people wanting a new thing is that's when the most community information, most community activity exists, right?
Yeah, and if you want to be part of talking about it with your friends, like, you got to do it. Like, that's the trap.
Because, like, how many people are thinking or talking about Hogwarts Legacy now? Like, there's no activity, right? Even though people are probably still playing it, it's if you want to find someone to talk about it with, like, it's past, right? And in 3 months,
it's
like,
true.
Baldur's Gate 3 will be the same. Like, no one will talk about it anymore.
Not fewer people. I feel like that some of the games that are actually good though have more legs than that.
I agree. I mean, so for example, like Speed, the texture of the community changes, right? So like speedrunning continues to exist, for example, right? Or like challenge content or things like that, like content creators who are really into the depth of the game, but the more casual, I said the dirty word again, the less serious, the more like let's play-ish single playthrough type content or community sort of disappears, right? You sort of feel like now you're wading to this community where people, you're like asking questions and people are answering your questions. It's not like it's a different experience than
and
when it
you're
first
also
came out.
pointing out that the system, the marketing system, which trickles down to all of those influencers, reviewers, online YouTubers, they are so incentivized to talk about it now and sell the ads now and all that.
Right.
It's just, you have to be a total recluse to not want to take part, I guess, and not be attracted to taking part. It's all sort of stacked against you there.
Right.
But my point is, it all rolls up to the discussion about $60 games, in my opinion. Like,
Oh, really? What do you mean? In what way?
You are incentivized. You're basically coerced into having to believe you have to pay for that when
yeah.
I mean, sometimes you do, I guess. Specifically in multiplayer, and if you want to talk about it. But I think,
No, I get. So I think what you're saying is that like if you're not incentivized by those things, you still like everything the marketing team is doing is trying to pressure you into buying the game now at launch when it's the most expensive, right?
And I think there are communities that should be still existing or do exist for, specifically big games. I mean, MMOs that have been out forever. But I think in a non, money-backed world, there may be more discussions about long-term older games or games that are continuing to be built upon, where I think a lot of that just gets sucked, all the air gets sucked out by the constant marketing PR machine behind this stuff.
This is why I think the $6 box game is the worst model of the three models, right? Because it's the one that
for players, you mean?
For the quality of the game, which I guess means for players. I don't know. I don't know what it does to the dev side. Probably not good things either, based on stories about rushed games and like quarterly profits or whatever. But
any because of this, all games are not going to be. They're never going to feel finished to the dev unless they really have control over that.
Yeah. And the reason I think it's a bad model is basically the things you're describing, right? Where because all the money from the players is so front loaded and is so like marketing driven, the incentives don't line up to quality, right? The incentives for profit and the incentives for quality are not aligned. They're sort of at odds with each other, which I think is why I think this pay up front model is not necessarily good. That being said, there are some games that can only work. Like, it's really hard to imagine a Zelda game or a Mario game not having this model, right? Like, what exactly is the alternative? So,
I mean, if there were as much as I like free to play and microtransactions in the way that you get way more value up front, and it's kind of up to you.
Yeah.
Sort of how much money you're going to put into a game. It is up to you. How do you do that with a giant single player experience so that it doesn't feel just gougy and shit?
Yeah,
shitty?
exactly.
I don't know.
It's like
you sell every region of the map or whatever. Like, ugh.
It's just not good, right? It's like it is for the player. If it's done well, it may be still the best one, right? Because it's the one where you pay a set amount of money and you get a set experience, right? You don't. There's no.
But there's something that feels bad about it. It certainly breaks the immersion, right? Like, you discovered the volcano. Like, I'll pay $250 to actually go into the cave.
Oh, no. I actually mean the paying upfront part is the best for the player in that case.
No. I agree.
Yeah. But when it's not done well, and it's often not done well because of, has to compete, the quality part has to compete with the price part, right?
Yeah, I don't know what other business models are out there. There's like, there could be a subscription service, but it has all other kinds of problems. Like, do you subscribe to Nintendo first party games, for example, and get them
Yeah.
all or whatever?
Yeah.
But again, that's even more like kind of front loading what you pay.
Yeah, exactly. We'll save that for our business models of games podcast.
Okay.
In 2034, probably.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll be alive.
Let's move on to sort of the topics we want to cover today. So there's being a gamer, and then there's being a person who plays games, right? Obviously, the G word is a dirty word on this podcast.
Well, let's talk about that a little. Like, what's the context there? Like, because I feel the same way. I feel a little weird saying that. Like, yeah, I'm a gamer.
let me say one thing about identity before we fill in the rest of this content, which is I think
I'm a movie buff.
I think it's quite obvious that like no one, I certainly don't, but no one really gets to tell you how you define yourself, right? I mean, that's
no. I mean that in your identity comes from you, unless you're like a prisoner being, getting it beaten.
I mean, if you identify as like a serial killer, I mean I guess go for it, right?
I mean, that's a solid identity. Yeah.
Yeah. The problem is that doesn't mean your identity is right. It's the same argument with opinions, right? Like, okay, you can have whatever opinion, you have the right to have whatever opinion you want, but that doesn't mean people cannot tell you that you're wrong, right? I think that's sort of the gap that people that don't understand this kind of run into.
Well, okay, and there's also the element of what I was born into versus what I chose to do or be.
Right. That being said,
Yeah.
So, for example, like sexuality or gender is a big part of identity, right? And those are things that you didn't necessarily have a choice about for the most part. However, other people still judge you, and you can argue that they shouldn't judge you. But I would say, like, people, generally speaking, people have the right to judge. And that's because, having the right to do something is like the lowest bar you can possibly have. It basically, it might even be lower than like, it's not illegal.
You mean the right to think something about others?
Yeah. It's not the right to do something is just another way of saying it's like it's not illegal to do that, right? Like, you don't get thrown in jail for doing that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're right or you should respect their opinion, or my opinion or anything like that. But
the reality is that exists everywhere usually.
Yeah. And there's by that same token, it's like, in some ways, I think making playing games such a big part of identity can be unhealthy in some ways. If you disagree with that, I mean, that's okay, right?
I disagree. It's always healthy.
Sure.
Games for life.
Yeah. But anyway, basically, you have the right to define what your identity is. You don't have to change it based on my opinion, but I still have my opinion.
Yeah, you may have to hide it in certain societies, certain cultures like ours, but yeah, you probably still, that doesn't change it inside of you, unless you were being violently beaten and stuff.
Well, it still doesn't change it, right? It's just
guess not. That's where
I
mean, that's what 1984 is about, kind of. But
that's where your right is being infringed upon, right? And that's where we get a line that's
yes. I mean, that's where we got a problem. Like when somebody's identity, quote unquote identity, infringes upon the rights of you, or the your ability to live, like when you're hurting other people, essentially.
And this is where we have to be objective and not use vague terms like right and freedom and liberty.
Freedom.
Right? This is where it's like, okay, well, if you identify as a serial killer and you get put in jail, it's different than if you identify as Muslim and you're getting put in jail, right?
Yeah.
Like those are not the same thing, even though superficially you can say, well, this is just, you're infringing on my right to express myself or whatever. There are
Yeah, I mean, that's breaks down, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
a serial
There
killer is going to kill people. Muslim person will pray to Mecca.
well, depends on how Islamophobic you are, but yeah,
Yeah, I mean, okay, sure.
there are objective differences, right? Where this sort of like vague rules that we sort of lean on for argument don't really work when actual tangible things happen.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, okay.
Okay. Anyway, so being a gamer, what does it mean to be a gamer versus a person who plays games? What do you think?
I mean, yeah, it's tough because I do think of myself as someone who plays a lot of games because I do. It's just
Yeah.
this is the reality of it. But I've never. I guess I find something uncomfortable about identifying both as what I like to just do for fun on the side. That's just like basically consuming a piece of entertainment that costs money or whatever. And then on top of that, like you said, there is a negative stereotype around gamers being angry little boys. There's a lot of truth to.
There's a lot of truth to that, yeah.
And I see how the word gamer is thought of among normal-ish people, among normits.
When normies,
Like,
yeah, normits, yep.
there is a kind of like, you know what? Like, I would feel weird saying I'm a gamer to any woman. Without being like, but I'm not that guy. I'm not like that. I'm not.
Yeah.
I think we should have female characters and players. So yeah, there's an embarrassment there of association. So yeah.
I mean, identity is a difficult thing for me, at least, to sort out entirely, right? Because like you said, it's like, imagine there's something that feels empty about just being a person that plays games, right? Like it feels like just because it's like some pure entertainment thing that comes up, it's a hard thing to wrap your entire identity around. That being said, I can totally see. So like, for example, if someone, if we take it out of games and we talk about like movies, right? Or TV shows, like if I imagine a kind of person who's like the quote unquote bad person, the bad version of the person who identifies with TV shows, it's like someone who's like doesn't have that many interests, so they just picked a thing to have something to talk about with other people, and then they just like watch some new TV shows and have surface level takes. But there's also a good way for that to be expressed, right? It's like a person who
there's nothing inherently wrong with any of this.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's kind of like the way the world is set up too. Like you pick the stuff you like that is being produced.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, like you said, there's a healthy way for that to be expressed, right? Like if a person is really into acting or following actors, following TV shows, script writing, whatever, they don't even have to work in the industry or whatever. But there's some kind of sense that you get from a person where it's like, oh, they're actually into this in like a healthy way, like they know a lot about it. I think that's a reasonable. Like you would, if you talk about that friend to another friend, you'd be like, oh, that's a person who really likes TV shows, right? That's sort of their identity. It's like,
yeah, you know what? As you say this, there's the gap with like it feeling like a real identity is that it feels like you're not contributing anything. You're not either creating or contributing to the world. You're just kind of consuming it and then talking about it, which, again, fine. And maybe you don't have a chance to contribute more in your life for a lot of reasons, but that's the gap I think I'm seeing.
Yeah.
Like, can I really call myself, like I'm a games industry guy, but all I do is, just post negative Steam reviews or email Anita Sarkeesian.
Yeah. So I think that's where the gap is. So, but what are the things that we associate with or society at large associate with being a gamer? Well, mostly it is the angry little boys part, right? Where it's a person who. So for me, if I picture the unhealthy expression of this, it's like it's a person who sort of knows a lot about like what's upcoming, or follows all the news, or talks a lot on social media about every game that comes out, maybe. Right? It's more about the fact that something is a game rather than the fact that they want to play it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, they just want to like take in and be part of the discourse about it,
Right.
in some way.
Right.
Get their opinion heard.
Yeah. And I think one of the key ways this can be expressed unhealthily is that like I said, it's about the fact that something is a game. Like, oh, what is the hot new, Bethesda game? What's the hot new like action game or whatever? What's the new Nintendo game? And they have like some opinions about like what is the best Xbox game versus the best PS2 game, rather than. And I think a lot of the ways that can feel empty is when those are not games that they play and enjoy. Right? It's more about talking about it or having opinions about it rather than actually consuming the thing.
Okay, interesting. Okay, you mean just people who kind of like I guess you're saying have opinions beyond the stuff they even play, like just want to be part of all the discourse?
I think so. And I don't know, maybe I'm like straw manning here essentially.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's hard to know, right? Because I'm not part of this, but I feel like a lot of the discourse often comes from these areas. And the reason I feel that is sometimes when I look at the problems people have with games, the problems objectively, as far as the player goes, are very small. They're blown away out of proportion, for example. Right? Like I feel like for some things, it's like if you actually played the game, you would, without having known this beforehand, you would not have felt like this is a problem, really.
Okay.
Things like that I feel come up, somewhat often. But then there's also just a level of like people feel like they want to go on the internet and get angry for some reason. So.
Yeah, I mean, if that's like you say, if that's the case, if a lot of these things are sort of surface level complaints and not, it's not really ruining your experience, quote unquote. You're there for something else. You're online for some other reason.
Yeah.
And it may just be to be, like you say, be angry on the internet. I mean, obviously we want to do that. Like we're angry people, and anonymously shitting on stuff must feel good in some way.
I mean, you've done that, right? When you were a wee lad.
Yeah, I liked fucking with people.
Oh, okay.
Specifically to just like get a rise out of them. So that was anarchy. No, that's not. No, I know some nice anarchists. It was just being an asshole.
Yeah. Understandable. Okay, well, that being said, so what is the right way? What kind of role should a game play in a healthy, balanced lifestyle? Right? Like if we're saying that, why should you play games, basically? What is the reason to do so? How do you relate?
What's healthy?
Yeah.
If there is an answer to this, I mean, everybody has shit they want to do on their downtime. Something is some relaxing hobby, or you get some sort of fulfillment out of it, whether it's just relaxation or you get to turn your brain off and not think about the problems of your problems, the world problems.
That is the purpose of basically all entertainment. Right?
Yeah, and I think I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
No, there's not.
Yeah.
In fact, I forget where I read this, but there are several studies that sort of compare quality of life from like the start of the 1800s to now, and one of the biggest differences people felt in their quality of life was that there's way more entertainment options that developed between then and now, right? First of all, you stop working like 14 hours a day.
As much, most of us.
Yeah, not the finance alphas, of course.
But yeah, it's gone down thanks to brave union people. We fought for weekends and shit.
Yeah. And so in addition to that, just more technology and more things were invented for people to fill that free time, right? So like baseball, I think, was one big one in America. There's similar things around the world. And then as more technology appeared, there was movies and then music.
Yeah, we got
so
a whole new swath of opiate of the masses to keep us busy.
Yeah. But it's not a negative thing, right? I think in general, studies, I guess I need to look this up to confirm, but that seems to have generally improved everyone's quality of life and productiveness and happiness and stuff.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and the more it's reachable to everybody, it's like it's a salve. There's just ways you can make it through the day, make it through your life, or
right.
Distract yourself from the bad stuff, or have a break from it.
So I think when it comes to entertainment, it's just a way, like, it is good, like there's some kind of human need to have downtime and then to fill that time with pleasant things.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think games do that in a different way. The things like games are not a new invention, right? Like people have played like card games and board games from basically the dawn of society. People who are lucky enough to have free time, of course, because we're not enslaved to build the pyramids or whatever. But games do that in a way that's different than I guess it's like a more active form of entertainment.
Yeah, and I'm missing some other big things here. Like there is the social aspect. Like a lot of people play games or watch movies or do whatever as something to do with friends or to meet friends. Yeah. Case in point, us. But and then there's also the competitive aspect. Like I play games because it's a way I can work out that urge, or feel like I have a little power, if even for a moment in my life.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, because you know who Faker is?
I do know Faker, yes.
So there was this one of the things I thought about a lot, like many years ago, was like Faker was like flunking out of school and stuff, right? Like Faker was not. If League of Legends didn't necessarily exist, it seems unlikely that he would have been very successful. He would have just like, I don't know the details of the story, so I'm hearing like fourth hand. But in general, like it's not like he would have succeeded at anything he would have done, right? But it is cool that we got this. Society now has more ways to create success, right? Like he became extremely successful. He became some kind of role model, champion, weird, like influential figure type thing, in sort of this one avenue where his like competitiveness or his like some weird talent plus competitive ability, allowed him to like rise to the top. And it's sort of the same with sports, right?
It creates this ecosystem of hope. What if I can do this? This is like something maybe even I could do it. Yeah, it's aspirational.
Games are competitive games are one of the big selling points is the aspiration, right? And I think it's important for society to have that exist in a healthy way, because I was talking about this with actually one of my students when I was a tutor. It was just like, at some point maybe he would have been like, maybe that would express itself like in the army or in the general, but what if that also didn't exist, right? It could have come out perhaps in unhealthy ways. He may have joined a gang or whatever, right? But
sure, okay.
Those kind of competitive motivations, I think it is important. This
to
might
have
be
an outlet for those.
Yeah, to have an outlet in society, right?
I think you're probably right. Like looking at our history, looking at what we're like, especially men, like the competitive drive and having, being able to prove your strength or, your skill in some way.
Exactly.
Having an opportunity to do that in a way that doesn't actually, murder people.
Yeah.
is probably a good thing. But, on the flip side, it's also like being on a team and playing games, I think is generally going to be good. But being an outsider who maybe hopes someday I can be an influencer, like you're talking about there being new opportunities for people in this field, and there is truth to that. But it's another one where the amount of people who are going to want to is going to
Rebecca Black
hugely.
problem.
What's this?
This is the
It's
Rebecca
Friday?
Black problem, right?
That it's Friday?
Do you know? Yeah. Do you know? No. Do you know Rebecca Black's? You know how Friday got made?
No, like her mom or her parents bought her.
Yeah. Her parents just paid like Timbaland or whatever. I don't think it was
Oh,
every
that's
Timbaland,
right.
but
Yeah. There's a
it's
rapper in there.
no. It's the thing with pop music is super like algorithmic plus marketing based.
Yeah, it's
Right.
manufactured.
So if Rebecca Black's parents or whatever, or I guess she herself, she just wanted to be a pop star, so her parents paid like one of the best, most what's the right word? Like viral, most popular appeal producers to make Friday, and then it did what it was supposed to, and she became. Well, she didn't really become a pop star, but
We
it
know
did
her
exactly
name.
what it was supposed to, right?
It did possibly partially ruin her life. I'll bet.
Yeah, that's sort of the problem, right? But that is the same thing with that. Whenever we talk about like people that want to be influencers, sort of the same thing, right? You can manufacture that, but the outcome is not.
I mean, but that said, I'm sure there are some manufactured lots of manufactured YouTubers
Oh yeah,
that
there's
are
tons,
successful.
tons,
So
tons. We need to get on that probably.
yeah, I don't
Manufacture
want to.
some views.
I'll manufacture some for you. I don't want to be like and subscribe.
I mean, when you were working in games, it feels like you knew a lot of these people too, right? I mean, they weren't going about
I
it
knew
the same
some,
way,
yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah, and some people, I mean, and it runs the gamut. Like some people some of those people are just genuinely just big enthusiasts. Like they get a charge out of talking about games, and it's sort of just a natural fit. And then there's some people who are just trying to figure out how to make money, as always.
Yeah.
We'll be a little more convinciable to bend their rules a bit to do that.
Yeah. What were we talking about? Wow, that was a far tangent. Okay. So entertainment, it's games fill time, but they sometimes do more than fill time, right? They supposedly can teach you some things in some ways, have some level of transferable skills. That's perhaps
Like,
a bit of a stretch, but it's
like
not
pushing big blocks around and stuff.
So, okay, let me give a very basic example. One of the things...
Searching trash cans. That's a good one.
Oh, yeah. The Lieutenant Surge trash can puzzle, of course. Deep logic. One of the things... This is very, very light, right? But one of the things psychiatrists tell people to do if they're worried about dementia is to like do simple games like crosswords, right? Or things like that to sort of keep the mind active.
Yeah.
Video games generally are more, you have to think more, right? You have to plan more. You have to like learn more.
Yeah, you're participating in it, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
you have to work out your brain sometimes, not always. Sometimes you're just jamming on the X
Yeah.
button or whatever, and
I mean, there's literally games that are just like playable cutscenes, right? Which
Yeah.
my least favorite category of game of all
Yep.
time.
yeah.
Not
Well,
counting visual novels, although they're.
Yeah, I was
don't
just about
think
to say
novels-
visual novels.
I don't
are
think visual novels are
that.
games, but that's a whole separate story.
I don't think
They
they're
are art,
games.
though.
Okay. They're games. All right, we don't need to. Let's save that
let's
for
move on.
the
So-
VN.
It in some way, like, and then at a more advanced level, a lot. I don't know how much I believe this, but there are like chess grandmasters, whatever, that like do classes for corporate executives that are like, learning chess will help you. Teaching logical skills to.
Yeah, I don't know about that either.
I mean, I think it's not nothing. Like, I
mean,
think
chess,
it's non-zero.
chess is also this thing of we've talked about how I feel about it, and it being like, I don't know, if you can master chess, you're actually a eighth level master of strategy.
Yeah.
not just you're really good at chess,
It's just a
which
game.
has no bearing on
It's a good
anything
game.
else. Is it? Is that a good game?
I think it's a good game. I have a video series planned, I guess, at some point. I'll get to it about the intricacies. Okay.
So I have something
Okay.
about the whole label of gamer. I was thinking about what I actually say in my life because right now I'm desperately trying to make not real world. I shouldn't say that. I'm trying to make local friends.
How's that going?
Mixed results, but it's
yeah,
going.
understandable.
It's going. We're working on it. We're finding stuff.
You
But
should-
mhm.
You should take my path and just give up on making friends, local or otherwise, and then
Absolutely not. And you didn't get. Come on. You invite people to your personal server to be your friend. So you do it.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, real life, in person, flesh and blood. That's not for Regal anymore. It's all the virtual. But anyway,
Not while I'm here. Not while
I never use the word gamer. I never say, "Hey, you a gamer?" Or, "Yeah, I'm a gamer," or anything like that. I say, "Hey, do you play games?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm into games. Sure, I play a lot." But I don't like the label. I clearly avoid it,
Yeah.
and always have. Like I remember the first time I was called that, and it seemed very manufactured because it was kind of like a salesman-y person. But there was a brief time in the early 2000s where they were trying to make PC bongs, PC cafes a thing in many American cities, but in the one I was in, Minneapolis, they were popping up, and my friends and I were checking them out. And ultimately, they were just like too expensive. We didn't need, if you want to meet people or have a social experience or have like a party there or something, I get it, but it didn't make sense for us as much. But when we first walked in to like check it out, like the first thing the guy at the front desk said was like, "Hey, welcome, you guys gamers." And I felt the biggest like runaway urge, the urge to escape. There, and I like kind of turned around, but then my buddy was like, "Yeah, we are. We just want to do this." And I was like, but
That's,
even then, even back
I feel that
then,
urge in every social situation, by the way.
I mean, me too. I mean, I definitely want to run at all
Sorry,
times.
continue.
I'm an avoidant, but that was. I remember it sticks out in my mind as like, oh no. I'm trying to think why that was. I think as growing up, games weren't as socially acceptable until like college. And you know what? The internet was had started being around then. And I think gamers had a reputation of just being flame throwing assholes and misogynist and racist and all that stuff. Like,
Yeah, well, that's kind of true.
oh, it's like the dawn of what do you call it? Just room chat. God, I can't even think of it.
IRC?
No, not IRC. I'm talking about when games had built-in voiceover, chat, like Call of Duty, playing your first Halo game where you can hear the 8-year-old calling you the N-word or the F-word or whatever.
Yeah.
It was pretty clear, and that experience being pretty universal. Like if you're just in general chat, it's a shit show. And I think I associated that with gamer, like any decent person logging on to those things would be like, oh my God, like I'm turning this off immediately.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair.
So yeah,
I think that's reasonable.
But what about you? Have you ever used the G word?
No.
About yourself?
Well, no, not really. I mean, the thing is, like, when I was in middle school, in high school, or not high school, middle school, and like, I guess elementary school, I was not like I was still, my brain was still like only half an almond, not fully formed. But when I was in middle school, like it was definitely not cool because it was North Dakota to like be a gamer or play games at all. Even though everyone did it, it was sort of this like taboo that like you were a nerd.
Yep.
You didn't want to be a nerd.
Yep. But a lot of people did it.
Yeah, a lot of people did.
The nerds.
And I made a lot of friends with people who did. Those were my
Yeah,
friends,
same.
actually. It wasn't that hard to find them. It was just that, like, in many situations, it was taboo to talk about it. So I think that's maybe why I never consider myself that way. The other thing I was thinking about with gamer is that, like, one of the things I feel like happen a lot is, like, there's this idea when you're a quote unquote gamer that, so for example, I feel like I've heard this, where it's just like, oh, you're a gamer. How can you call yourself a gamer if you haven't even played whatever the most recent popular game is? Right?
Gamer
Like,
gatekeeping.
yeah. There's this expectation that part of the sort of subculture is like, oh, well, you have to play all the games, right? Being a gamer means you follow the latest games and you play them and you know stuff about them.
And these are the people who like find some pride in being a quote unquote gamer.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. I think that does happen. I think that's part of the reason why a lot of people don't care for being part of that. Just because, like, for me, I actually don't play like most games. If you look at people who play games and look at my Steam history, are like, well, no, but even no, what I mean is, like, people actually, this happened like last year. I think I was talking one of my Lost Ark. Actually, no, this was the crazy person. But anyway, in one of my Lost Ark groups, we were looking at each other's Steam histories one day, and someone looked at my Steam history and they were like, "Do you even play games? Like, what's wrong with you?" Because my Steam gameplay history is like Dota 2, and then it's like 4 simulation games, and then it's like nothing. Like, there's no games that any normal people play, is what I was told, which is kind of true, actually.
But what you play, are they on different systems or different places?
I just don't play. Like, I don't play single player adventure games.
Yeah,
like I don't think I've ever finished a mainline Final Fantasy, for example. Like, I've never played.
You pick games and go deep on them, then.
Yeah. That is what I usually.
Which is another form of.
Which is fine, but it's not
true gamerism.
Yeah. Well,
you're a specialist.
Oh no.
And there's also
keyword.
There's also on top of that the you have the motion sickness with 3D games, right? So
yeah. Well, not only first person games.
Right.
All 3D games, but
what about third person games where we keep like moving the camera around? I guess that's similar.
That's probably would not be good, but
but an overhead map kind of situation, you're fine.
Yeah. That's usually what I like. That's usually what I end up playing.
Yeah, Lost Ark.
But I think a lot of the part of the subculture is like this idea that, like, you like games because they're games, not because you like them, right? Like, this is a popular game, right? Assassin's Creed is Armored Core is a popular game. It's the hot new game. You should play it because you're a gamer, right? And I think that's what keeps me away from it for the most part. It's like,
oh, okay, yeah, okay, sure.
Like, I'm not going to play Baldur's Gate. That's not the type of game I usually like.
And
so
it's
don't
also
see a reason
like
for me to play it.
And I mean, I get it if those purists are going to say, like, well, then you have no right to comment about it or give feedback on it or whatever.
Sure.
Which I'm like, okay, yeah, you're just kind of like a dilettante on those games. but I mean, yeah, that's weird. That is weird.
It is. It's
I mean,
weird,
like, if you're a film guy, a movie buff, you're gonna see all the big movies of the year, or probably that's the expectation, I suppose.
Right.
Which is
that's where it leaks in. But the thing is, like, for one, that's, I don't know, on some level, like, movies all fit neatly into genres. Actually, I have a question. Since I don't really know people that do movies, like, do people who like movies generally like all the genres, or like at least watch?
I think if you're really into movies, you probably have your favorite genres and specialty genres, and your favorite movies probably fall into those genres. But I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of generalists out there that are like, feel like they want to be able to talk about everything, critics, I guess, that don't want to specialize.
Want to be critics.
The Eberts of the world. But yeah, no, I think about my brother, who's a real movie guy. Like, he definitely likes certain kind of movies.
Right.
and is very judgmental about other genres that he doesn't like.
I mean, it's understandable. I'm very judgmental about game
Yes.
genres that I don't like. So
Yeah,
I'm just a very judgmental person in general. I mean, what can
that's
I say?
true. I mean, aren't we all?
I've come around on that. Like I think I've met people who have been much more open-minded than me, and I think that's sort of pushed me in the right direction as well.
Good.
You should have seen me back in college. Oh boy.
Yeah, me too. I hope you don't. Yeah, God. I mean, I thank Mother Earth.
Mother Earth. What,
I
you
thank
like,
God every day that
got some ayahuasca?
I think. Well, yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna puke later in this episode. No, I thank God every fucking day that there were not people didn't have cameras in their pockets when I was in high school and college, and just or even like just videoed the horrible shit I used to say. Like just the fact that there's not those videos floating out there. Did you see? I think it was on our server. I think that video of the kids getting into a fight and one of the kids like shits his pants during the fight.
I don't click on.
And there's like a girl who's like, "Ew, he shit his pants." And it's like that video will exist for the rest of his life.
I think it's okay. Well, I guess let's put it this way. Like, the I Like Turtles guy. I Like Turtles kid. Like they did. Aside from the one story they did, like 15 years later, like would you know? Like, there's no way you would recognize him as an adult, right?
Sure, yeah. Like how if you keep that on the down low,
you just keep it under wraps, and it's kind of like whatever. I mean, at the end of the day, I feel
but
like
your friends, like your enemies.
I guess you need to make new friends, right? I mean, I don't know. I feel like
I guess I hope so. Yeah.
I feel like because of where I came from, at least, it would be pretty easy for me to just be like, oh, haha, like you used to, because like I used to be, I mean, I used to have like all the bad traits. So to me, it's just like, yeah, I understand. Like people grow up and move on. In fact, when
I mean, I understand. Like you shouldn't hold on to that shit forever, but there's plenty of people who just want to hurt each other.
Yeah, let it out in your pants.
Yeah, in fact, I encourage it. It's healthy. Better out than in.
So
If pissing your pants is cool, then what does she say? Ah, fuck, I can't remember it.
In fact, it actually really annoys me when people keep bringing up things that like content creators or
Consider Me Miles Davis. I forgot that.
What?
It's from Billy Madison, the Sandler movie. Yeah, anyway.
Yep, I totally know what you're talking about.
Consider Me Miles Davis. That's ridiculous. Okay.
What were we talking about? Oh, it kind of annoys me when people keep bringing up things that like a content creator said or did like 8 years ago that they've apologized for. There's always one. There's like a couple of people that like hang on to this forever for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, it can depend also on what you say and the context surrounding it. Like, is it believable that this person has and can change? Or are we just like, why are we still listening to this person even 10 years later?
That's true. So, back to games. Whoa, we got really far off on that one.
In fact, I'm going to extend it one more bit.
Okay.
About the whole gamer thing and how I thought of it in high school. Like a running joke between me and my nerdy friends who had not yet even shaken a woman's hand, a girl's hand, is that like we joke about being at a cool party or like trying to hit on a girl and being like, our opening line being, "Do you like video games?" That was the running joke.
This I see. Well, this seems to be a common experience, like when people first encounter the real world after high school.
Yeah.
But
anyway, please go on. Don't let me continue tangent.
Moving on. So, I think games provide a lot of unique outlets, right? Like they provide like mental or like strategic stimulation, right? Sometimes competitive stimulation, things like that. Of course, different games do different things.
Yeah, it works your brain, gives you potentially a little something exciting to do.
And games allow, in some ways, a lot more depth than other forms of entertainment, right? So, for example, You can't do this in other media. So there's like Star Wars lore buffs or whatever, right? I guess maybe are you one? Are you
Honestly, even though I had a Star Wars wedding, I didn't I wouldn't consider myself a buff. I don't know all of the stuff. I haven't seen all the movies recently, it's like so no.
Yeah. So you can do this with some media. You can become like a super movie Hollywood buff, but I think games offer it in more different ways. Like you have speedrunners, right? You have people that there's a lot of skills involved in that, I guess. You have a lot of people that like go really deep on individual series, which is more like a movie thing as well. You have people that can replay the same game over and over. You can do modding of the game, which leads into like the more engineering technical side as well.
Yeah, and that starts to be like, all right, you're contributing at that point.
Right.
Depending on what you're modding.
Yeah, I guess it depends. Games sometimes can lead to personal growth, maybe. What do you think about this?
What?
Can you grow as a person through... Can a game teach you to grow as a person?
I mean, yes, in the way that I guess other entertainment can, but maybe it is because it feels more engrossing or like I'm part of the story or whatever. It can have more. It can potentially have more of an impact than like watching a movie or reading a book. I guess, although not everyone agrees. But yeah, I mean, you could learn values. I mean, some of the question authority Final Fantasy JRPG, or like make sure you ask questions about your leaders or your religions, things like
sure.
some of that might have had a positive or an effect on me growing as a person.
Yeah. So story.
But also I was,
sure.
but also I was one of the people that was escaping the world through games.
Yeah.
Very actively. So I was definitely missing out on other growth opportunities at the same time. So it's not
right.
There's an opportunity cost there.
So I think there is a layer that can come from the story, right? You can argue, I don't know how much in fact, I think this is probably not true, but it can be argued that you might be experiencing it more deeply or whatever because you're involved in it, where you're making actions and decisions instead of passively absorbing it like in a book or a movie. But I think those are relatively close. But there's also other ways of growth, like the teamwork thing we talked about already, right? Where if you spend a lot of time playing on a team and you sort of dedicate yourself to getting better rather than yelling at your team, that can change things in the rest of your life as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Even
too.
in a single player game, that can, some kind of like strategic thinking or, learning information or whatever can maybe teach you some skills that are necessary. I think those are probably overblown by people who really believe in that stuff, but I think it's non-zero.
Yeah, I would never say this is the best way to grow at any of these things or even close to it, but it is. There are positive offshoots of it, sure.
And the benefit...
Oh, go ahead.
The benefit, I think, of it coming from games is that it comes from a entertainment source, right? Like if you can make your entertainment time double for any kind of personal benefit, that's a huge bonus, because then you still have your school time or work time, right? Where
you don't have to
do
expend effort.
Yeah,
it's like
exactly.
You're not working at something. You're just sort of you're enjoying it, the ride.
Right.
This reminds me of a lot of my knowledge of like mythology and religion and things, and even like much of my some of my vocabulary is learned first in games, and sometimes I've had so many experiences where my wife is like, "How did you know that?" And I was like, "It was in a video game."
True.
Did you take that class in college? Like, no, I played Persona 4 or whatever.
Understandable. Part of that for me also comes from games, but also I was just the kid that like read my history textbook for fun. So.
Oh. History buff.
Nerd shit. Yeah.
Or was this the case for all classes?
No, it was mostly history. That was the thing I found interesting generally, but
What kind of history?
whatever was in the textbook I had for the year.
Okay, whatever the lessons were. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I also like. Oh, the nerd shit discussion is an interesting one that maybe we will save for another day.
Okay.
But there is I heard something very interesting from. So I listened to a number of sports podcasts, and one of the players was talking about. Are you familiar with this individual named Kyrie Irving?
Oh
Yeah.
yes.
So how
Yes.
one of the
Is he's saying some Nazi shit? Is that guy?
well, he's mostly known as like a anti-vaxxer, but yeah, he also promoted a anti-Semitic film.
Oh yes. Okay.
There's a
That's
lot
the
of
truth.
there's a lot of anti-Semitism in the American Black community, unfortunately.
Yeah, it
if
sucks.
you believe in certain parts of that community.
You mean like Black Israelites?
I mean I don't know the details, but yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot. Like Kanye is also a part of this, right? Like,
Oh
there's a
yes,
lot of-
yes, that's true. Yeah, what a shame. That sucks. They're kind of. I think they're fighting the wrong people.
What was I talking about?
Kyrie
Anyway,
Irving.
one of the things the podcaster who's a former like NFL player said was that like one of the differences is there was a point early in life where he stopped caring about nerd shit, as he put it, and because of well, for him it was because of puberty, right? He was like I'm not super against like sitting at home and like learning and like trying harder in school and like learning about how biology works or whatever. Like I didn't hate it, but I was also like, I don't know, I'm gonna go get some girls.
Yeah, I want to fuck.
And then at some point, he took a lot of athletes or whatever like take this path where they drop out of the nerd shit side very early on, and and they just never. And that was his explanation for maybe how Kyrie came to be. Although that was.
But I mean, at some point, I mean, he had to really focus on He's a basketball player.
Yeah.
He he had to focus on practicing that, right? Like
that's usually how it comes out.
It's
right?
not just
like,
giving up nerd shit.
Yeah.
Basketball.
Well, it's part of both,
basketball
right?
is nerd shit.
Anyway, that's.
I mean, not
that's
the
for,
players.
That's for a total. Well, it kind of is. I mean, if you're a player, you learn a lot about basketball. It's sort of like.
You're also a
it's sort of like
physical
learning
specimen.
a lot about a. Well, yeah. I mean, that's obviously the biggest part, right? Like you have to have the physical talent.
Yeah.
But sort of like games, like you can go really deep on a sport. You can make your whole life about the sport. Right? In fact, they have a whole series of documentaries about American football called A Football Life, which is like you can very easily just make your whole life about football. Like there's enough to learn and think about and create and do that.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a totally viable career.
I wonder what percent, like so many people identify by the sports they follow and stuff like that.
And games are the same, right? Like games, you can, even if you don't join the game creation industry, it's very easy to just dedicate your whole life or to dedicate all of your free time to even like one series or one type of gameplay or one game.
There's a lot to do there.
Yeah. So there's just depth that is easier to get to, I think, than elsewhere. Let's talk about let's try to remember some of our most positive experiences with games.
Ooh, okay.
And what kind of categories fall into.
I like that. Thanks for turning it around. Let's talk about the positive and stop complaining.
Because the reason I want to do this is I want to think about if you identify as a person who plays games, isn't it best to focus on these things, right? And how they come about and how you can get more of them rather than focusing and talking about I don't want this to be so here's the thing, I don't want it to be about like positivity versus negativity, because I think too much positivity is also bad.
You mean like blind positivity, like ignoring real things?
Or the thing about IGN ratings, right? Where every single game gets the same positive rating. As long as they're not like completely broken.
Yeah, the 7s and 8s.
Yeah, like every single game gets that rating because they're just like, we're focused on the positives or whatever. But I think that's not healthy either.
Right. Like at what point is is a thing a criticism, a true criticism that really gets into it versus... Yeah. I mean, game reviews are so fraught to begin with. Like
Yeah.
IGN,
But
especially.
what I would say is like if
They
you
get paid.
well, yeah, they do get paid. You paid them.
I paid them. Say this is good. 97 score, not year.
What was I talking about?
Positive experiences.
Oh yeah, so I think if you're going to focus on not even that, I think if you're gonna spend a lot of time doing games on your own, on your time, in your time, you should try to maximize what you get out of it, right? And it's not like you should not criticize it when it's deserved, but you should just for your own sake, for your own benefit, focus on the best experience that you've had out of it.
Yeah, and I mean,
and
you want to avoid it, but it is. I mean, this is like how you can approach anything positively or negatively, right? What works for you in the long term?
Yeah. So let's talk about some. So if I think back to the most positive experiences I had, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is like a lot of games gave me like really strong momentary fulfillment. So these are like, I may not even have played them for that long. I may have only even played them for a day, right? But that day was really good and it was important for whatever reason for that day. So like, for example, Honey Pop was you play Honey Pop.
I know of it. I haven't actually played it.
Oh, okay. Well, you should play it. It changed the world, I gotta say.
Go on.
I think it was like the first adult game on Steam, maybe.
Oh, really? That they were like,
I think so.
Fine.
Like the first, like really, at least the first one that got like traction and was good and like was popular.
So there's nudity? Is there sex?
Yeah.
There is.
Kind
okay.
of.
Sorry, I'm trying to avoid. You labeled this momentary fulfillment. I'm trying to avoid making a jerk off joke.
not kind of joke. But I don't know. It was like I have a strong positive memory of, because basically I like randomly opened it as a joke, or I randomly played it as a joke, and then I played it for like 12 hours, and it was not really about the nudity part. It was more about I don't know. It sort of was a memorable experience. It changed some thoughts I had about what the role of a game could be or whatever.
And it's like is it like a match 3?
It's
like
a puzzly
game. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
A Bejeweled.
It's like this. It's match 3 dating sim hybrid.
Yeah.
And it's not a replayable game really. But it was just like something memorable that happened. A similar one is Blue Reflection Second Light.
Yes. I started playing.
I talked about this. Oh, nice. I wonder how far you got.
Not far yet.
Yeah.
I have to. It looks huge. It looks like I really have to sit down and dedicate some time.
I played. So like I had some kind of like nerve issue in my arm for a couple of weeks, and like I just happened to have already started playing this game, and all I could really do with my arms was like lie down and like hold the controller. So I just did this for like a week while I had that, and it was really good. Like those two things mesh together really well. Maybe I wouldn't even think so positively about the game if I didn't have that experience, right? But that was an example of like a game coming at a moment where it provided some really strong fulfillment.
Yeah, and some sort of relief, it sounds like. How's your arm doing?
In the context of Honey Pop, that's an interesting word to use, but my arm is fine. I mean, it went away.
Yeah,
I made a full recovery.
Excellent.
Just a flesh wound.
Yep.
Do you have any
movies
examples of this kind of thing?
Jeez.
Any memorable
I should have thought of this
individual experiences?
A lot of my memorable individual experiences are not individual, or they're like friend stuff. Like the biggest stuff that stands out of like games being like, oh my god, that was a great memory, that was a lot of fun, are different times playing co-op games with one or two friends, like Secret of Mana and old beat 'em up games like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles games, either at home or in an arcade. And similarly, just like competitive games with friends, like playing GoldenEye and playing Super Smash Brothers. Those really stand out as like, oh, these were great fun times with friends. There's a lot of laughter, a lot of good stuff. But is that about the game, or is that? I mean, it is partially. Those are good games.
It is. It has to be, right? Because if you did not have fun playing the game, you will not remember it fondly, right? It's like if you and your friends went to like a torture chamber together. You wouldn't necessarily
bad memories, for sure.
Wouldn't necessarily have a good time.
Like, this sucks. Why'd we do this? I'm gonna give you guys a bad Yelp review. And then some like single player experiences, just big feeling accomplished beating something, or very emotional moments in stories, like, spoiler alert, like, Aerith dying, sorry. Spoiler alert. Or, the stuff, the twists in Final Fantasy or Chrono Trigger, like, those stand out, or Xenogears, like, stuff that was like, oh my god, this is kind of like dark and heavy, that I hadn't necessarily seen in movies or read in books before. But I remember those too. And then, just
you
like
mentioned
winning, being like, I did it, I figured it out, I feel smart. I figured out the puzzle.
You mentioned playing some games while you were high.
I mean, yes, a ton of that. There are certain games that are better as when you're high than others. Like, I don't want to play a horror game when I'm high. I want to play a game with a cool world to hang out in, like a Zelda, like an open world game where you can be like, I'm gonna wander off and collect flowers or whatever.
Sure.
It can't be too complicated for that. And another thing that comes up is games that were there for me when, like, I was really depressed, like when I really needed something to be uplifting, or just to, and to keep me busy, like playing Stardew Valley when I was really depressed was a nice experience that I remember. Yeah. Stardew Valley jumps out.
Sounds correct. Stardew apparently did, well, I guess it's not a surprise, but did very well.
It's a really solid game. It's nice. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say it's probably next episode I want to talk about the new paradigm of like the $30 indie game. Stardew Valley is $15, I think, but I think that is a much better, in many ways, a much better model than the $60 AAA game. But
I think so. I mean, that's what I want, and I would love a world where people saw that the extra $30, is because of marketing, or I mean, it can be what your development budget, came down to, but it's just not always that.
It's marketing, and it's like graphics, right? It's sort of like
pushing the
less
limits
about
of
games
graphics.
and more about big explosions and
I'm also
cool things that appeal to.
I'm also kind of at probably just getting to the age where I'm like, I barely see people talk about upgrades in graphics that I cannot distinguish. Like I'm like, this has ray tracing and this doesn't. It looks the same to me.
This is a part of the gamer subculture thing too, right? Because I feel like people focus on this because they can, rather than because they can actually tangibly see the difference.
It's funny. It's weird. Like, there's times where I'm like, so this one has a high dynamic range and this one doesn't, this video and this video, and I guess I like the HDR one more, but I can barely, I can't really tell. Like, if I didn't have it on, I would never know that this wasn't a good looking game. There are advantages. I mean, there are differences there. I'm just saying it certainly isn't the jump from fucking 8-bit to 16-bit or whatever.
Yeah.
Where you're like, oh shit, this like looks way different.
And I think in some ways marketing has a lot to do with that, right? Because
for sure.
You want to have something to market, and that is something that you can put funny words on and send to
the video card market, like all that.
It does all tie in together. But I would say that is an example of something that I feel like, the gamers talk a lot about, that I think just doesn't matter. Like, should not get way more attention than there's a massive gap between how much effect it has, which is not zero, and how much attention it gets, which is a lot.
Yeah, it reminds me of the I guess you could call it discussion around like new iPhones.
I guess you could call it discussion.
Like new iPhones and shit. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, this is, one, I don't know the words for it, but this, I get more megapixels, this many pixels on the camera and the screen, and this power upgrade. But at the end of the day, it's still the same fucking shit.
Yeah. There's the thing is like because like we know one audio file, right? Like there are people who tangibly can see the differences and care about the differences, and it affects them.
We know an audiophile? Who's that?
It's Ein. I don't know if you know him. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him.
A little bit, but
yeah. Like I'm not saying that those people are like making it up and are fake, whatever. But I think those are people are the exception rather than the rule. Like I think most of the people who talk about this stuff and purport to care about it don't know enough, or aren't audiophiles who know enough to.
Yeah, I doubt they have really a full understanding of it. They're just kind of following what people are saying, and
right.
And
but maybe that's projection.
The press writes a lot of articles about that stuff
the
too.
Press is not projection.
Yeah,
I mean, for articles like that, just I would assume the press just gets gets a memo from the marketing team and be like, hey, use all these words and talk about things this way, and then they just like paste it right into the.
I mean, I'm sure they can. They probably just hire true believers who.
Oh yeah, that's.
And then tell them, like you say, then give them a list of. And try to make this look like a big change.
Yeah.
Or a big upgrade, rather.
Marketing, am I right?
Marketing. Yeah.
Evil's a marketing coming soon. And then the what is the opposite of evil?
Good.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you say good, it's the goods of marketing, which means something else.
Oh shit. The positive.
The positives of marketing.
Okay. Which I don't know. Are there? Yeah, maybe so.
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean, you tell me. Community is back to positive thinking. I mean, community is sort of the big one, right? Like a lot. So, for example, in Dota, or any sort of like long-running team game, esports-ish community, there's just tons of stories. Like every time you see, so they do this thing at like the tournaments where they interview people, right? The fans. Like there's just like 7,000, like every fourth person, actually there's probably 3 out of 4 people probably are like, oh yeah, I'm here because these are my buddies that I met playing Dota like 8 years ago. They live in
You mean people
Saudi Arabia.
Audience at esports events?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. They're like, hey, they live in Saudi Arabia. I live in Germany. We hang out once every 2 years. We're like best friends now, whatever. I mean, that just happens. That's just a common experience for people who are normal and don't tell other people to kill themselves, right?
Yeah, this is their social thing they do, and that's great.
Yeah, and that's great, right? I mean, in fact, we met like that, sort of.
Yeah, through games.
Yeah, and I've met.
Yeah, through social stuff on the server. Yeah, on the Discord server.
At this point, I feel like I've met most of my friends who I've been friends with a long time, like that, and I think that's. Like without games, that it's hard to imagine that would exist, right?
Yeah,
that's sort of
or certainly not for me. Like I don't know what else would get me on a server like that.
The community aspect it's just another way to build. I mean, the same thing happens with a lot of hobbies that involve other people, right? Yeah, but obviously games is one of them, and it's a strong one because it often forces you to engage with other people, right?
Yeah, and I mean, the positive aspect, it can sometimes be negative, is of the internet, right? Is like it's much easier to just find people who are into the stuff you're into rather than,
right?
I guess joining a club or whatever, or hoping the people you meet happen to be into stuff. It is easier, which is nice. Like we have a way to continually come back to a spot and just talk about this stuff. So
yeah.
Where it's bad is you can also find the people who want to start the race war with you.
I guess that's sort of the problem. That is sort of what this episode is about at the end of the day, right? It's like
race war.
No, but it's
No.
like finding like if you consider yourself a gamer, you just join a community of gamers.
Mm-hmm.
You're depending on who you are, you're probably not going to find what you're looking for, right? If you because of the
You mean just
tenor
like the
of what
generic?
yeah, if
I'm
you
gonna
go to
be
r/gaming,
yeah,
you're not going to find what you're looking for probably, right?
and it's
And that's
also.
because
Go ahead. Sorry.
of I think it's because of how what that means when you define yourself that way at a surface level, right? Or what maybe it's the opposite, like what most people who define that themselves that way seem to actually represent.
You're talking about you. There's more negative offshoots of that, or like more likely
Yeah,
to be an asshole, or
or
what do
it's
you
more
mean?
like the things that gamers seem to talk about and care about are not the things that lead to these positive experiences that most people are looking for,
Okay, what's the connection there? Yeah, and there is none.
right? That's what I mean. It's like it's hard, you're playing games because you're trying to find some kind of positive experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
For example, you're trying to find this community, like maybe you're looking for friends and you're looking for this community, but somehow somewhere along the way I feel like it's gotten lost that if you go to r/gaming or r/dota 2, somehow I feel like you're just not going to find that. You're going to find a different kind of person
I see. Yeah,
than
you're
what
not
you're
going to be
looking
like,
for.
we're going to make friends or anything. We're just probably going to
Yeah,
argue about stuff, and then
yeah.
men's rights come up. Well, actually, in the server we were on, that probably happened quite a bit.
Well, what can you do?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Some expectation there.
yeah.
Did you want to talk about any of your other positive experiences here?
No, I think we can move on. I mean, I think these have largely been covered. Do you have any more positive experiences you can think of? Any specific ones you want to share with the class?
No, I mean, I've talked about like my time in playing in arcades was.
Portia?
Sorry, my time in what? Russia?
Portia? No,
Portia?
Portia. Do you know that game? Or maybe it's Portia?
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. There's a relatively popular like farm sim called My Time
Oh,
at
okay.
Portia.
Yes, my time at Porsche. Oh, okay. I didn't even know that one.
Anyway,
Developed. Oh, it's a Chinese game. Yeah, I don't know. I didn't know that one. So no, not at all. I can't.
okay.
Yeah, I guess it. A lot of it is the multiplayer, is the social aspect, because I've always struggled with social situations, and it's easier when we can all like do something and look at a screen.
Well, that's true. Like right now.
It just gives me, yeah, it gives me something to talk about. It gives me something to talk about. Whereas I've always been bad at sort of just the broad small talk thing, and yeah.
Total aside, but one of the things I'm very happy I kind of realized was for me, I just don't engage in small talk anymore. Like I've decided that I'm just going to be totally fine just like sitting in silence in a car if it comes down to that.
It's just like
I would rather
because that is so painful to do, or so
no,
onerous, or
I just think it's not helpful. Like I think it's better. I think it's more true to myself or whatever, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but like I just have never found that like between the two things, whether it's just sitting in silence or like looking at your phone at team lunch, which I now happy to do, which is like between that and trying to force conversation, like I think overall it's just much better to accept that I'm not going to waste time on small talk, waste energy on small talk, and just be fine
I think
being like slightly awkward and silent.
for me it depends, because there are people sometimes I want to get to know, or I think, oh, that's cool. I saw a glimpse of something cool that I want to like dig in on. But like if small talk doesn't turn into something more specific,
Yeah.
something more where I can show what I'm into and have that connection of like, yeah, we both play games. Let's talk about games. That's something we can actually get in depth about versus, what's your career like before this, or where do you live and all that stuff. But I think it is sometimes a necessary intro to those
I,
opportunities. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That
I
said, if
totally
you're
know what
just
you mean.
finding that there's a person that you only make small talk with all, day after day, and you're like, I don't really care to know this person, like, by all means, avoid that. you
Yeah.
know, I
I
agree.
I totally agree with that. I think the difference is basically what you said, that like small talk has to lead somewhere. Like I'm totally fine. I'm interested in generally like where people came from and like how they grew up and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
if they're interested in engaging in that kind of conversation, like that's totally fine, right? But if they're not, or if if it's like a wider social situation where you're not really trying to talk with one person about something, or if the conversation is something I'm not interested in,
Right,
like
like this just isn't worth it.
yeah, at work, like people talk about finance a lot. I'm just like I
Oof.
find just tuning out, right? Like
Yeah,
I'm not really or investing. Like
yeah.
I'm not
I
going to
get
pretend
that.
to be interested. Or
I,
like
I, I get that. I get that too. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is that sometimes small talk is necessary for
yeah,
opportunities
it
to
is.
actually get
It
deeper,
is.
which sucks. But
Everything has to start with small talk, right? Which is fine,
I think
but
so. Although in recent years, for better or for worse, I have been often cutting to specific things a lot faster,
yeah,
trying to skip over the general shit like the
yeah.
weather and the news and stuff like that, and or local news and stuff, and
What do
being
you think
like,
about Trump's mugshot? Any
yeah,
opinions?
fuck, yeah, or I mean, maybe this is just level one talking, but talking
Level
skill,
one charisma.
yeah. But I mean, I try to get to like, hey, what are you into? What do you do for fun? And just like get talk about that before what do you do for work shit that you may not
The
give a fuck
problem with what do you
about.
do for fun, I feel like when I ask people what they do for fun, I never get an interesting answer.
Well, some people don't
Everyone's
do
always like,
anything.
I feel like that's fucking everybody, dude.
And if that's
Like,
the case, I may be not interested in talking to you more anyway. But
like
some people are
literally,
just like,
maybe
yeah, I hang out. I go to drink. I do this sometimes.
maybe it's just an engineer thing, but like I feel like everyone I talk to that doesn't play games, that's literally their only answers. It's like, oh, I go rock climbing once a month. It's like, cool.
I
You just
mean,
like go
that's
to the
something.
rock climbing gym.
I mean,
It's like,
that's
yep,
something. Go get out. And like maybe I'd be interested. People would find connections just from that.
yeah, I
We
guess
go
so.
rock
I guess
climbing
so.
together.
But
Uh, at least that's doing something. You know, when it's just like the most basic. I was gonna say lowest common denominator. The easiest thing to talk about is like is like TV shows and movies, right? Like
that's why people.
just try to find one that both of
Yeah,
you watch and then talk about it. But
I think
it's
that's doing that is sort of being a gamer, right? Like being a person who just plays all the most popular games because you want to have something to identify with. I think
and it gives you
that's
something
kind
to
of
talk about
where it comes
if
from.
you
And
can
that's
find people that are into it.
I think that's fine, but I do think if you're a person who falls into that category, I would say, at some point, look for something that means more to you, right? Like you can't just fill your time forever with this is something that other people would be interested in. Find something that you're
Yeah,
interested in,
yeah, and I mean, having genuine passion for something reads to other people. Like
Yeah.
people recognize when you have a real obvious passion for something and interest in something versus like, oh, this is just I know how to talk about this. I
Yeah.
read the newspaper, I read the front page today so I could talk.
Yeah.
And generally, people are attracted to that. People having actual passions and a drive to be excited to talk about. Like that's an attractive thing to most
Yeah.
people. I don't know about you.
Depend No, well, it is to me, but I think there is a category of people who I don't know, like there's like some people that you just get this feeling that you're never talking to a real person, if you know what I mean.
NPCs you read?
Yeah, they're just like always they're sort of always behind this like weird positive veneer where they're like pretending to be excited about anything you tell them about. And then
Well, that
I
could
don't
just
know.
be being trying to be polite.
I know, but like that's not I don't
You
know.
don't like that.
Anyway,
There's too much fakery there
yeah.
for Regal. I get that. You don't like that shit. And that's totally
Um
fair. A lot of people, that's the way we operate.
I
It's
know.
because we think we have
And
to.
it's okay. It gets you through life, right? But I don't know. There's something about it that just like it makes me feel like I don't I don't want to speak with you because it's like talking to an
It's
NPC, like you said.
it's tough. I'm a weird guy, and I've always been a weird guy. And if I the more I try to pretend to be just like a normal and just like get along, just be able to talk about things, I never get anywhere with that. I
Yeah.
don't make friends that way. They're like, oh yeah, they still know I'm weird. I just am also boring. So I try to get to like the really like, all right, this is what I'm into, and I have opinions about this weird shit, and I think it's funny or whatever.
I mean, you
And
care about politics,
I
right?
will get a weird person if I can get a weird person interested. I'm like, all right, this person maybe can be my friend.
I mean, you care about politics. Are you like actually politically active in some way?
I was for a while.
Don't-
I don't do shit. I don't
Oh,
do
okay.
anything now, but I still read about stuff. But I don't know if
Can
that's
you
a
just
good
like
idea.
argue with people about politics and just like fight with them
Yeah,
at
yeah, I
first sight
can.
and see what happens?
I can berate them about the. I like to berate them about how their political views aren't fully formed and ignore
Same.
things. What's that?
Same.
I like dunking on them for that reason. Like, you don't even know what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah.
Or trying to convince people about like the morality of things. Some people like I like to think about all of the trickle down effects of things and sort of know about the stuff that we just tend to ignore. So yeah, I do want to talk about those things because I think sometimes we don't think about things the right way.
Sometimes.
Yeah, always. So yeah, I do, but I'm also it's also polarizing. Like it's not like you can't just casually talk about it, especially the way I want to talk about it,
Well, yeah.
without getting into a
That was
fight.
mostly a
I don't
joke.
know. Okay.
I would say, starting with politics is probably not a good way to meet somebody. But
Yeah, I've struggled. Yeah, I've struggled with this. There are ways to be very diplomatic or to be very like bring people along with you that I've managed to do sometimes, but it does not come easily to me. It's hard.
yeah.
I wish I were better at it, but it often devolves into my like no, you're not seeing your negative effect on other people and getting angry. So it doesn't and that's not going to convince anybody.
I think the core of it is the getting angry part, right? Unfortunately, that's sort of like a genetic thing almost.
Uh
I think we lose
and
a
your
lot of our
upbringing.
power.
Your upbringing,
Yeah,
like,
and your upbringing. So I said almost.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I think
You're right.
you lose a lot of your ability to be diplomatic or to sort of guide people in the right way or to actually do the things that will help them change their mind when you become angry. And that's sort of just a bar that
Yeah, and honestly, it's like who unless somebody already knows me and trusts me or respects my opinion for probably other reasons, they're not gonna listen
Yeah.
to me anyway. Like,
yeah.
I mean, maybe if I manage to get a good idea out there that makes people think about it, that can happen maybe sometimes. But again, it's not when I'm angry. So I'm just yelling at someone I barely know. It doesn't. They're just like, oh, you're just a crazy person. I'm like, yeah. What of it?
Where were we? Anyway.
Gamers.
Let's talk about we're talking about the positives of life. What about the negative effects games can have on people's lives or in our lives?
Actually, do people think of gamers by and large as right wing?
Good question. I think I don't know about people. I think of them as extremists, one way or the other.
I think of them as conservative on the social aspect for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. There's a lot of, I think there's a lot of overlap with the sort of gamer mentality subculture with the 4chan subculture, right?
What is the 4chan subculture?
It's sort of libertarian, I would categorize it as.
Uh-huh.
It's sort of a lot of arguments about like, why can't I say the N word?
Yeah.
Right? Like
Or why can't I
that kind of thing.
fuck my stepdaughter or whatever?
Yeah. And there's a lot of arguments that go into that. It's a lot of like faux intellectual superiority also. It's like, well, if you think about it logically, why can't I say the N word? That kind of thing.
I mean, I could tell you why not, but yeah.
There's a lot of, I think it's a cross between like extreme like social awkwardness, like people, like young people, especially young men who, or boys, I guess, in many cases, who don't necessarily have an outlet for their social anxiety or shortcomings.
Yeah, I mean,
Crossed with,
we have so many disaffected people,
yeah,
without who don't feel real connection and don't feel any attachment to the culture at large, or just people that, and I guess those people can find each other on a 4chan.
yeah.
And
But I also think of it, there's also extreme left wing
sure,
things, right? Like there's always a bunch of doxing. I think there was like doxing with the Blizzard lawsuit or whatever, right? Of people who feel like these like devs are evil or whatever, and they like try to take.
you're talking about like the sexual harassment stuff, doxing those
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Who feel well, it depends on who you're like. I think the targets of the doxing were not the people who performed the sexual harassment in many cases.
Oh well,
right?
yeah. Then I feel differently.
That's sort of the problem.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know,
there's sort of a also just like a mob mentality on the internet
Yeah.
that can be like, it's not smart, that we're like, we're just gonna fucking harass whoever we can related to this.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of it's just very, I think the main association is just a lot of anger and vitriol, right? With
Yeah, I mean,
whatever.
I'll defend some of it a little bit with like, because sexual harassment and assaults is so, in my belief, is so not, there's no justice. There's very little justice acted upon. These things get swept under the rug so readily, and particularly in male-dominated industries like gaming, where it's like, nothing's gonna happen to these guys. Maybe we'll fire a couple, but maybe we'll still pay them for a couple of years or whatever. Like, it's not. There's a palpable sense of this wasn't justice, so people are like banging their heads against their keyboards, saying like, what these fuckers are getting away with it. So yes, I'm gonna dox them, and I feel justified. And I guess I'm just saying I have sympathy for those people.
I think that's fine, but it gets dangerous really quickly, right? Because most of the time that's not directed.
Yeah, it could be directed at the wrong
targets.
people, or people don't know the actual stories. I mean, there's things that can definitely go wrong and get bad.
And I think we can actually tie this into the community dev relationship.
Okay.
Right? So where, as a former marketing person, what is the use of sort of the gamer subculture? Like, what did you use them for? How did
we exploit them, you mean?
Yeah.
Uh
So I think, from my perspective, like literally the only use is like they amplify stuff on social media, right? You're just like, hey, this new game has like ray tracing 4.7 or whatever.
Shit. Wow.
Send this to Reddit and let them run with it. And it's
Yeah,
like,
I
or
mean,
it's like,
there is that,
hey, we need to,
or like we talked about working with gaming influencers, that
yeah,
are again broadening the message, or getting the message out more. But then there's also, we talked about as well, like getting well collected feedback, getting play testers and things like that, and having a structure for feedback that is actually useful.
Yeah, but see, the point is that doesn't come from social media, right? Like, well-structured feedback does not come from.
No. So you're talking about what is the use of gamers on social media specifically?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, that's where the community, that's where they live, right? I mean, to me, that's sort of what defines these communities, that they come from social media.
I mean, we say that, but I don't know how much it's changed, but like whenever we talked to large groups of people about, their gaming community is usually just them and their
Yeah.
friends.
No, I totally get that. What I mean is like, but they don't. Did those people define themselves as like gamers in the way that we're using it? I think
Yeah,
that's
maybe
what
not.
I mean,
Maybe
right?
not.
Like,
Yeah,
I think when people think of gamers,
they think of
it's
those
they
social
think
media
of the people on Twitter
whiners,
and Reddit that are
rage
doing
guys.
and rich, and once in a while they'll be like, hey, this guy shot up a school and he played World of Warcraft once, he's a gamer. So
Yeah, they use the word when in those situations. Like, yeah, this guy played Doom and shot all this stuff, all these people. Yep, got to get rid of Doom. Um, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's just we get a publisher or a dev gets just extra marketing, word of mouth, social media, word of mouth, trying to get them to do some of the work, do some of the
right.
posting, users generated content or whatever, or just sharing the shit we release. I mean, that's definitely a huge part of it. Yeah. I think another part is managing the overall message that players are talking about, right? Like controlling it is probably the wrong word because it's really hard to do that nowadays, but like directing the message and trying to affect the sentiment around it
Yeah.
is most of our job in marketing. But if you just talk about like the devs, if you kind of try to remove the selling the game part of it, I don't know that they're, I don't know. I mean, they're just your player base that are hopefully bringing in more people or keeping the social aspect alive or the servers alive. You always want more players, even if they're not paying, because it makes the game better generally to have more players. But
Interesting.
beyond that, yeah, I don't think there's a quote unquote use for the gaming community.
Yeah. So I guess what I would say is like there's that community has I think that shows that that community's feedback, like precise feedback, doesn't matter so much. It's more that they exist, right? But the thing is, they have they have like a trickle down effect on sentiment, but also like the rest of the community, right? Those people have a trickle down effect on the people who don't take part in that community because they often, because of the way social media works. So I guess at the end of the day, this episode is just a long complaint about social media.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those.
They have a very large effect on what the people who are part of that, whose gaming community is just their friends group, think about the game. Right?
Yeah, which is always interesting to me because at this point in my life, of course, I'm just like, oh, it's just what kind, think of. So, I think, oh no, just you should ignore all of the Reddit discourse on games. Like you should totally ignore it because it's going to color your thoughts on the game and it may not be at all correct or true to you,
right,
or even objectively true. But then, I talk to people like on our server, like when I brought up Last of Us 2 and a couple people said like, oh, I heard that was really terrible. Like people were all complaining about it. And it's like, no, what they were complaining was about having the two main women characters and having a muscly women character and having a trans character and all this. Like they were complaining about that shit. The game is fucking awesome. It's an amazing game, but you've heard that it's not good because of that bullshit.
Yeah.
That sucks.
It does, right?
That sucks.
And it's not something you can necessarily control. It's not even something that it's not like we're immune to it either, right? Like there's things that we know very, like for example, I don't know anything about Call of Duty. I think Call of Duty sucks, or how about FIFA? Like I think FIFA sucks because it's full of microtransactions. But I don't know. Like I've never played FIFA. I don't know how many microtransactions there are.
Yeah.
You know, it's
I mean,
that stuff.
I probably am. I try not to do that though.
Yeah,
If only because
it
I
depends.
am, want to fight against people like me.
Fight against the
The
marketing
machine.
gods. Um, how about the? So there are some people who are also fans or fanatics uh, about a certain dev or sometimes even a genre, but a certain
Or
game or a certain dev or a
consoles.
certain console. Yeah.
Swim
Um,
fanaticism.
yeah. About us, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
so I want to think about this a little bit. So this is like fandom, right? Or some line between fandom and fanaticism. But I think like fundamentally, it's not we can't start with the idea that like being a fan of something is evil or
Okay.
wrong, right?
Okay.
Um, I don't know, maybe you disagree actually, but I think that's a
No, I think you can be a fan of things, but I think if you,
strong statement.
yeah, my tone of voice is uh, clear about how I feel about it. But um, when it starts to be, you are just ignoring the bad things because
Yeah,
of being a fan, where it's like, I don't know, they did all this. I had such a positive feeling going in, but years later they're different or worse or whatever. But I'm still a fan, and I'm still gonna like defend them. Yeah, that's just like this is the team I'm on. It's kind of the how a lot of people are about politics and
yeah.
or the
This becomes tribalism, right?
yeah
Like but the thing is like there is sort of it's like a spectrum, right? Like on the very far one end of the spectrum, it's like you have generally positive sentiments about this, and then the other side, you're like somehow for some reason you're like vehemently defending um, Xbox because you decided at some point that like Xbox was the best.
yeah.
And now
Sony sucks.
you're an Xbox guy.
Nintendo's for the
Um,
kiddies.
but
It's a pedo console.
interesting. Um, anyway,
Someone's probably said that. I don't know.
um, well now you have,
Yeah, I
so that's
have.
good. I still think it's good. It's not bad to just feel like a fan of something. Like I just really like this series. I'm
Sure.
gonna buy the game
Yeah.
even if it's bad. I'm gonna try it. I think like you
Yeah.
said, at some point the objective evaluations have to come into play, but it doesn't. Not everything has to be objective all the time,
Yeah, I
right?
mean, I'm a
Um,
fan of old school point and click adventure games and generally they are not good games. And I know that.
yeah,
But it's not like I'm going to defend them to the hilt, I guess.
it
It's
depends
more
on
like I know it's something you might not like, but I really like it.
yeah. I would say one way this can also rear its head though is when the dev makes a change that you don't like and you feel like personally betrayed, right? For
I
some reason.
trusted you. Bethesda, I
Yeah,
trusted
like
you.
Final Fantasy, like some of the recent Final Fantasies have had this, right? Like they keep adding like new worlds systems, battle systems. Like Final Fantasy 15 had like cars, and sure
That's, I
people
mean,
hated that.
to not expect that from Final Fantasy is like you're
At the
not
yeah
you haven't paid attention because every game has a different battle system, every game has a different mini game system. Like that's what they do. That's part of it.
I think yeah, but I think inevitably, I think another example is like maybe Street Fighter or something like that. Like
Uh-huh.
any kind of long series where you become a fan of the series, it can often get to a point where you feel betrayed when things change because you're like
Yeah.
you have some kind of like weird outsized expectations.
Yeah, and you're
about
like, "Oh, what? You already this is the part I love. You made this great.
yeah
Like why are you changing it? What the fuck?"
yeah. Um,
You email
so
Kojima.
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think the only like the relationship as a this applies to like sports or whatever too. I mean, the relationship as a fan has to be one way, right? Like obviously they express themselves or fans express themselves of however they want, but um as a developer, I think you need to do what you think is best, right?
I mean, this goes
And
back to our
not
feedback episode, right? Like
yeah
uh if the developers made the new cool thing in the first place, like and people liked it, like you had a good idea, and maybe you should be the one choosing the next thing, not just whatever people happen to post this week.
Right.
That said, though, there is some truth to getting feedback, or having someone play your level and make sure there's not like obvious things that don't work.
Right.
But yeah, it's, I guess, but there's a line there of, if you're taking design feedback, like actually going back to our feedback, it's about seeing what people's experience is like, and then you change the game based on that, rather than let's ask the players how we should change the game. Right. You know what I mean? Because when you do that, whatever their personal thing is, buff Yasuo.
So that's how we thought about it from the dev side, right? But from the player side, the fan side, I think there's somehow I feel like sometimes devs are pressured to do more and more of catering to their audience. I think, for example, a lot of Patreon games or Kickstarter games have implemented this more and more, where they're just like, hey, vote on the next focus or vote on the next system or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's
fraught.
It's fraught, and I think it's
like at what point are you the expert? At what point is your team the ones who know what the fuck they're doing, versus like choosing milestones and stuff? Ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe
it's complicated. I was saying it's a complicated relationship, because it's hard to say that, because like it's very easy to imagine a situation where that's the right thing to do, right? Where it's like, hey, this dev team really needs some direction, like they're wasting a lot of time, and so you would say, okay, maybe that's supposed to come from like the producer or whatever. But
if it
comes from
like if you're polling your players or your people buying your thing, it's just like you might as well draw the answer out of a lottery barrel or whatever.
Yeah, maybe.
Bingo tub. What do you call those things? The things they turn and then the bingo ball comes out?
Oh, I don't know.
It's that. We shouldn't do that. Don't do that.
Yes. Hat. We'll call it
drawing
hat.
out of a hat. That makes sense. I mean, I think what we're talking about, like you say, the tribalism thing can become a problem when you're just like blind to, you just want to fight with somebody about your team or whatever and sort of ignore the bad things. And
that,
I don't know.
The thing is, like, is that helpful from the marketing perspective though? Like, do you try to cultivate that?
Oh, this is what I was going to say. You're right. So this is part of the problem. The publishers, and sometimes the developers, the makers, it can depend, but a lot of the time it's the publishers are being like, no, we want players to feel part of the community or feel part of the game, like the development process. Whether or not that's going to be good for the game doesn't matter. That's how we're going to get people to buy our game or to stay playing our game. And sometimes those things can be at odds. And like you said with the Patreon example, you're giving people this impression that you are funding us so you get to have some kind of say. And we're going to define what that level of say is, but you're going to probably judge whether or not it was worth it, depending on what we give you or whatever. Right. And that, again, like those things can be at odds, right? Like what individual patrons, especially if you've got tons of them who are going to have differing opinions, like how much helpful direction are you really going to get out of that? And I think, to your point originally, it's like, you're not. You should just be doing it yourself. You should be like, and you should be upfront with it. Be like, hey, if you're funding this game, like we're going to get your feedback, but we're making this game. Devs don't say that a lot. Do they?
Yeah. No, they don't.
Unless they're real rock
the
stars.
opposite, actually.
I think some developers like Kojima or Rockstar, they might just say like, yeah, go fuck yourself. We're making this game, and can get away with it. But maybe that's because they're big enough that their publishers won't stop them. I don't know.
yeah, the publisher part is a big one. That's the other potential episode for this week. Like the relationship seems difficult, right? Because
Yeah, I
many
mean,
times the publisher's goals are not are all kinds of things that don't result in a better game at the end of the day,
yeah, and we,
but
mhm.
might result in more sales.
Right. And I mean, then again, this plays into the whole like, what kind of sales, short term or long term?
Yeah,
And so many games, so many publishers operate on a in the small term, based on like what are our next quarter profits versus,
yeah,
how's our company going to live for the next 20 years?
yeah. Which is an interesting topic I've been thinking about,
Hmm.
which is should companies try to survive forever? Is that I mean, I think they will no matter what, but is that the healthiest way for a company to operate? Say, hey, we want to just survive as long as we can. Branch out, divest our investments.
I mean, there's a
So
whole lot
many
of
life
more.
insurance.
There's a whole lot of elements on top of that. Like,
Yeah,
what is the quality of the thing you're putting out?
yeah.
Who are the people you are affecting, helping? Hopefully, I don't know.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah, I feel
So
like
time to wrap
I feel
up.
like I've been all over the place here.
No, that was kind of sort of the intent. I mean, this is a difficult topic to. I mean,
Parse.
you can't really wrap it up in a single thing, right? It's just.
We didn't. I want to talk about the what can games be a negative on your life thing.
Oh,
We
okay,
kinda
yeah. Let's
skipped
finish
over.
that.
Because yeah, it
Um,
draining time, draining money. I mean,
Those are the big ones, right? Like,
any entertainment is going to have that question, though, right? Like, am I wasting
But-
time?
but games are especially like you can't. There's no way to spend $10,000 on TV shows, right?
Is there on games? I mean,
Oh yeah, you play one gotcha game and you have zero impulse control, and
but that's a small
it's all
slice
gone.
of the audience who's actually going to do that.
yeah, but it has or actually you can people also do that with streamers. Like
Yeah, yeah.
although that's not strictly games, right? But people will be like, hey, the streamer needs to go to Norway to do whatever. I'm going to send them $2,000.
Yeah, to meet
You do that 5
PewDiePie.
times and your money's yeah.
He's in Sweden.
Oh, those are extreme examples, right? But I think it is possible. Like games offer a lot more ways to drain your money than most forms of entertainment, other than like the casino.
Yeah, there's a deeper well there. Like you
Yeah.
can go very far, but I'd still argue that yeah, you can, and even if you're spending $60 on new games, you're spending a good amount of money compared to like if you buy one of those a month or two of those a
Yeah.
month, that's more than a lot of
That's
TV
more than, like-
subscriptions and stuff.
If you spend $120 on the AAA games a month, you're buying. That's like every TV subscription, right?
Yep.
Like every service.
It's like having cable.
Yeah, XD. But I think the draining time one is actually even more the problem for some people, right?
Uh-huh.
Like as much as it is way overstated how many people are addicted to video games, like it is a real thing that happens, right? That people
Is it expressed more that you're wasting time than other entertainment, like watching TV and movies and books?
somehow I think so. Like somehow I feel like well actually I think so for sure, because I don't think I've heard any. Has anyone ever been addicted to TV and like not gone to class or whatever? I feel like that's very difficult.
Huh.
like,
Addicted in
to
the same
music.
way. Yeah, where you like put off other responsibilities. I mean, that's
Yeah.
talking about something else, though. That's like it's affecting your life. You're skipping and dropping things. And yeah,
But
to your
games-
point, I think no. I mean, maybe like I had to go to this concert or whatever,
Well, sure, yeah.
but yeah, games definitely can do that more.
Games can do that.
They
in a
seem more
way, I think.
engrossing. But you can
Yeah.
certainly be a person that wastes all your time on TV shows, you know?
That's sort of the thing, I think, where but regardless of whether or not games are better or worse, like it is a thing that can happen, right? And
Mhm.
that's where it can become a problem, and those are the things you have to watch out for.
It also
even if you're having positive experiences.
it also has a reputation for a lot of games can be very long. Like you can play them for hundreds of
Yeah.
hours. And I think that there's a sticker shock there that you don't see with the shows you
Yeah,
watch in the
that's
same
true.
way, or the
Yeah.
movies you watch,
Yeah.
even though you've probably spent a whole lot of hours watching the whole series of fucking My Little Pony again. Friendship is Magic.
Yep. Friendship is Magic. I watched like 8 episodes of that.
Yeah, when it first came out, I was this is embarrassing. When it first came out, I was still like frequently watching children's cartoons on TV. Like a real weirdo. Both me and my wife, like my wife was an animator for a while, so there's some excuse I have.
Cool.
But she liked that show too, and she also was like a fan of new, inclusive, progressive shows that we didn't have when we were kids. So I think she always kind of wanted to see the cuteness for a few episodes at least, and then we'd move on.
I'm actually considering spending more time watching some cartoons I missed out on in childhood recently.
Ooh, probably stuff that I watched
we'll
as
see.
an adult. What are we talking about?
I think I watched the first episode of the Powerpuff Girls recently.
Oh wow, you're talking about
Yeah.
these are kids shows.
Yeah. Yeah. The shows that I didn't have cable to watch as a kid.
I watched a bunch of Powerpuff Girls as a person that was too old to be doing so.
Yeah.
The colors are nice.
I don't know. I mean, the reason this came up is because there's a lot of SpongeBob talk for people our age, right?
There is.
I guess we're not the same age because you're 70 years older than me. But,
Yes.
and
SpongeBob was big when I was in college, I think, or in high school maybe.
yeah,
And
something
I
like that.
saw episodes because they were. I used to just have my TV on 24 hours a day,
Yeah.
so just like
Yeah.
stuff was on. And often, if I didn't know what else to watch, I was like, "Oh, this is a cartoon. this is gonna be fun."
But yeah, like I think SpongeBob especially is the kind of show where adults can get a lot out of it. I think there's a lot of
Yeah, there's funny stuff in there.
funny stuff that goes way over the head of kids.
Yeah, like
I
Ren
think
and
same with a lot
Stimpy.
of cartoons from the era.
Yeah. I mean, it's always been the case, honestly. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of the good cartoons work on both levels. Like, even Looney Tunes had that in
Oh yeah.
in many respects. Yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
some of those funny things. Anyway, I don't have anything to say. Frustration and anger, though, in games.
Yeah.
Getting mad at
That's
video
why-
games is a problem if you don't learn, if it doesn't teach you any lessons from it.
Yeah, I mean, frustration is not, again, it's not, or like it's something that comes with the territory of the good thing. Like good things can also come out of frustration, right? Like you can't win all the time, and or like you have to lose sometimes in order to grow or whatever.
Yeah, learning that
That's
lesson,
how-
we spend our whole lives learning that lesson often. And yeah, being able to take a loss and learn from it is a big step versus just like, fuck. And then you really feel like you wasted your time and money when you start losing
Yeah.
a game a bunch.
Yeah.
That's why League of Legends matchmaking is designed to give you a 50-50 win-loss experience generally.
Well, that's every matchmaking system, right?
Yeah,
Hopefully
it is.
But unfortunately,
So you win
they
sometimes
don't
even
all
if you
work
suck.
that way. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Like, but I think at the end of the day, the negative effects games can have are not totally different from the negative experience any entertainment can really have in some ways. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, the audience of movies has a lot of the same bullshit complaints online about movies that they have about games, honestly. Yeah.
at the end of the day, it's like it boils down to the way social media is used, right?
Yeah, what a
It's
shit
more
show.
about but I would also, for any individual though, that part doesn't matter. It matters. I think a lot of people consider themselves, like, I guess at the way we said at the beginning, like a lot of people are looking for something to talk to other people about or to latch onto as an identity.
Yeah, it's
and
a
they
social
end up on-
signifier. It's a way to just
Yeah.
find people to talk to and hang out with. Yeah. So it's an
And
interest.
they end up on gamer, and I think that trying to define yourself that way, I guess in conclusion, trying to define yourself that way leads to less of the experience, the positive experiences that made you want to play games in the first place. That's
it can, and
how I generally feel.
And it's also the word has taken on a new meaning within the larger group of people, or in the media and stuff. Like there's a negative association to it,
and because there is that negative association, the community then gets defensive, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sort of leans more into those things and like takes the points of pride or whatever. So if we're gonna like Gamergate, if you remember this.
Oh yeah, I remember. It's called Gamergate as if there was some sort of like, oh, somebody got caught out doing something they shouldn't. Like, when I don't think that's really the case. It was more about, this was around like Anita Sarkeesian and her articles and shit, right?
I think so, something like that, yeah.
And it was mostly about she had a focus on misogyny, or women's representation in games and in the community. And somehow Angry Gamer guys said it was about truth in reporting or something in games media, but I don't understand. I don't think there really was anything to do with that.
The thing is, like, I didn't follow this at all, except that people that I would expect to see it with a more objective view got sucked into it, like Total Biscuit, for some unknown reason. But I think it was
embarrassing. It was embarrassing because I was an adult by then, and I was just like, this is the whiniest little fucking man children. Like, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to be associated with that,
Yeah, I think that kind of thing happens a lot at a smaller scale, of course, but it's more just that people, because there's a negative association already, people lean into that because they feel like they want to belong to like this tribe, essentially.
Oh yeah, sure.
They're just like, I will defend my people and my ways against the encroachment of whoever.
Yeah, maybe she misrepresented something and they latched onto that. I don't really know. I mean, she wasn't actually a major influence on anything anyway. It was kind of a small thing.
That's another thing.
It was almost like it was just like the gall of a quote unquote non-gamer woman talking about what we love this way, because she was talking about the negative aspects. So yeah. We wanted to they wanted to jump in and defend their love.
Gotta draw the circle correctly.
And being like, no, you can play Princess Peach in Super Mario Brothers 2. She's empowered.
Sure. So I think it's like when... Actually, I lost my train of thought.
Do you know... Were you ever a big getting angry at games person? Do you tilt easily, as they say?
Kind of, but not in the normal way. I mean, never to the extreme extent, but I'm more of a person that gets I consider all my opponents, no matter what game it is, no matter what the situation is, all my opponents are animals that are very stupid, and if they beat me, they got lucky. And I refuse to respect them. That's how I feel about games.
Usually. Oh, you lucky motherfucker. So, I guess if you view all your opponents as that, you're gonna run into that problem.
That's sort of the mentality I have when it comes to competition.
You scum.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've been there. I was a terrible whiny brat as a kid and would cry and throw the controller and storm out, kind of thing.
I never did that kind of thing.
And I knew other people like that. Did you ever know any other kids or big
ragers? No. I mean, I know some people, or knew some people who like would argue, like flame other people, or like get into arguments with them. Like, the kind of people that will like add you after the game and like yell at each other.
Yeah, like you made a stupid move and you just got lucky because of it or whatever.
Yeah, I didn't feel that, but I never did that. I never saw any.
Man, I love
benefit
that.
in doing that.
I love winning and having a person tell you what you did wrong.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude, you lost. I beat you.
I'm the kind of person that would feel
Like
I would feel like that, but I would like I'd never
don't be stupid and
got
message
to the
them.
point. Yeah, I never got to the point where maybe like once or twice when I was like 13.
I
You know
mean,
what I did
I
do,
definitely
though?
have too when I was a kid. Yeah, and I'm just in retrospect, I'm like, oh, I just hung my ass out there. They're just laughing more at me. So that was
Yeah,
dumb.
I mean, what can you do?
I've
That's
gotten
sort
a
of the
lot
life
better.
of
I still will
child.
get mad in games, particularly competitive games. I'll get worked up, especially if I'm like supposed to be holding my own or carrying word I'm looking for, actually doing shit on my team and
Oh
letting them
yeah,
down. I'll start to get mad and start to get worse and get tilted. And but if I find myself frustrated or angry these days, I'm just like, all right, I gotta walk away and just come like, let's just walk away right now and come back to it later, because I don't get better, I get worse when I'm on
right,
tilt. Like
right.
this has been proven time and time again. So
That's generally how it goes. Yeah, I mean, I don't. I also just don't play that many, especially team games, but
yeah,
competitive games anymore. So it just doesn't really show up.
you don't get pissed at all your teammates on Lost Ark during the raids.
No, at that point, I mean, Lost Ark is nice in the sense that you can actually carry a lot of things by yourself as long as people can do the basics. And I wasn't really good enough to. Well, actually, that's not true. But generally speaking, like I was usually not the problem, but I was also not the top performer. I was kind of just in the middle, so I was
blending in.
like, yeah, whatever. I'm here for the ride.
Yeah, I mean, I told you that was part of the hard part for me. It was like, I'm not keeping up with the skill of the other people on my team, and
Yeah.
it's too much pressure.
That's understandable. I mean,
But I mean, I could just like practice and get better, but I didn't.
well, that's part of the growth that games can cause in a person, right? But unfortunately, you have to have time for that, which is why you kind of have to do it while you're in high school or college to like.
Yeah, or be a sellout like me and have your wife work.
Well, I mean, you're a billionaire, so that's not really.
I
a
mean,
problem.
yeah, I am not a billionaire.
Your money works
But
for you.
I am very lucky on what I stumbled upon that lets me feed raccoons and have time to speed run. Like, how do people have time to do that? I have not done it in a while, and I got to get back to it but I think I got to just stick to the small ones for a while because it's just so much time.
When it comes to hobbies like that, it really strikes me when I talk to normits how much empty time they have. It's like,
how much free time they have?
yeah.
Okay, well, what normits are you talking about? You're talking about like the office,
Like
middle class type of person.
Yeah, office normits.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
The PMCs.
Just like what's a PMC?
Something managerial class? Office workers.
Proletariat managerial class?
No, not decidedly not proletariat.
I see.
But yeah, people, sometimes it is amazing. I'm like, oh wow, you do a lot of free time, especially if you don't have kids.
Yeah, I guess that's gonna be. I don't know. People are so bored all the time, and that's where I'm just like,
That
play some
blows my
games.
fucking mind. I have never uttered the words "I'm bored." It's just like, what?
People who play games, people who don't are totally in different camps when it comes to this. Like, I haven't been bored for more than like a few hours at a time in like a decade.
Yeah, I don't even know what that would be like.
I have so much shit to do.
What does that mean?
I have way more stuff I want to do than.
And there's so much stuff. I mean, maybe if you're just like nothing about what I've discovered appeals to me, so I have free time. But it's like, you gotta figure that shit out, man.
Well, I think it's more like if your hobbies are like watching TV, you can't do that for that long. Like,
what? Yeah, you can do that all the
well, it depends on what you're into. Like, if you find a game you really want to play, you can play for like 300 hours, right?
Yeah.
If you find a TV show you're like, you can't, unless you just watch it over and over.
Like, okay, sure, but like I could be a Marvel person or a Disney person or whatever.
But even if you are a Marvel person, you can't. There's just not that much content. Like, the content fills a couple weeks, right? But unless you're just rewatching stuff over and over,
yeah, okay, I see your point.
It locks.
That
Unless
said,
you count like comic books or whatever, right? But
But there is enough like popular TV content like every week I could be watching a new series or whatever.
But that's where we get into the gamer problem, right? Where it's like
you're just doing everything.
If you're changing from a person who likes the MCU into a person who likes TV, and you're just watching a bunch of TV because you want to be a person who likes TV, I think that can often lead to a bad result. Just like if you change from a person who likes playing X games or whatever games you like to play into a gamer, and you're just trying Armored Core because it's the biggest release currently.
Yeah, the new Assassin's Creed.
Hey, I'm just going to play this because I'm a gamer now. I think that's where you can. Some people can do that and like it, right? But I think for a lot of people, that's where you lose the thread of why you were playing the game in the first place.
Yeah, it's just you're kind of generic.
Yeah.
Okay, gamers. Thanks for listening to this gaming podcast starring two gamers who game games in life.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's definitely correct.
Okay, is that it? Are we done?
I did it? Okay, all right. See you next time.
See you next time, gamers, on Open Betas. And the music that's playing now is related to gaming. Good night.